Elon Musk tweeted this tweet about Ukraine, and I don't understand what he's saying. I don't have the context of history of Ukraine. So I brought here my teacher to explain me everything about Ukraine so I can understand what Elon Musk said in his tweet.
You have to explain to people that whatever Elon Musk says, you must understand.
Yes, I don't like not understanding things, and especially when Elon Musk said it.
Yeah, and the story goes back many years. I mean, since I remember Phidias always come to me and say, you have to know that Phidias wants to understand everything what Elon Musk says, or whatever he tweets or whatever, and he always come to me.
Yeah, and sometimes it's about philosophy, sometimes it's about science.
Especially physics, which is easy for me, but okay, this time is history. But you are lucky because, okay, I'm a physics teacher, I'm a physicist. And I'm not qualified to.
No, he is. Guys, he spent 10 years of his life understanding the history of the Balkans and around there, Ukraine and Russia. So he's the most qualified person I ever watched on the internet to talk.
Yeah, but as an amateur, okay, I'm not a historian. But anyway, I know the region because I lived for sometimes in Moldova, actually many years in Moldova, which is neighboring Ukraine. And I kind of know about these things. Anyway, okay, let's start.
Dive into it. Okay, tell me what is Ukraine, when it started.
What you don't understand about this tweet? Nothing.
And saying supervision, Russia lives if is.
Okay, let me help you. Okay, the first part is redo elections of annexed regions. Okay, election means referendums. Okay, Russia annexed some parts of Ukraine, as you know, in the course of this war, and they did some referendums in order to show that the people there want them. So Elon Musk proposed that these referendums should be done again under UN supervision, because
so the previous time
obviously
Russia did it.
Yeah, Russia is not trusted. Probably they want to make a fraud or something like that. So
and whose idea was to make a referendum there from Russia? Just Russia.
Russia want to show that the local people, which are occupied by them, approve their appearance there. I mean, approve that they are under Russia, and they want unification because Russia declared that want to annex these regions of Ukraine as parts of Russia. So Elon proposed here that these referendums should be redone under UN supervision, which means under a trusted authority, unbiased authority. And if the will of the people is Russia to leave from these places, these regions, then Russia leaves, which means that if the will of the people is Russia to stay, then he proposed that Russia stays, which is
kind of very crazy.
Provocative, actually. Yeah, because, okay, if you want to understand this part, then you have to understand the history of Ukraine, what kind of Ukrainians would wish genuinely Russia to be there, which sounds a bit contradictory because no one talks really about the people that lives there. Usually they're not, I mean, the narrative by the media is like there is just one Ukrainian people. All Ukrainians have the same opinion about their history, about their culture, which actually is not exactly true. All Ukrainians are not unified. And okay, they are one people. Everybody in Ukraine, everybody who declares that he's Ukrainian, he is Ukrainian. But there are kind of two kinds of Ukrainians. Some Ukrainians look eastwards, towards Russia, for cultural inspiration. Even their language is Russian. They are Russian-speaking Ukrainians, although the media don't want to stress this fact. And there's another part of Ukraine that they look westwards. They prefer to speak Ukrainian language. So, okay, I think this is a fact. I believe that this is a fact that should be taken into consideration. Whatever the outcome of this war is, and even if Russia leaves, which is this is aspiration of the Ukrainian cause, then they will have to deal with this problem. That is a big part of the population.
We know percentage, approximately.
Is not easy because, you know, when I say there are two kinds of Ukrainian, let's say, there is everything in between too, even linguistically. So the more you go towards southeast,
towards Russia,
towards south and east, towards the sea and to the east, roughly, people tend to be more look towards Russia for their aspiration. I mean, this was the situation before the war. Now it's difficult to know. Maybe now they changed their mind now, and they all want to be just Ukrainians and have nothing to do with Russia. We don't really know what's going on now. But anyway, traditionally, let's say until 2013, when all this started, I know for sure that these people, like the more you go to the south and east, the people look more towards Russia for their like identity and ethnic.
They feel Russia closer
than the West. Because, okay, it's Ukraine, you have the West, you have the East. In the East is Russia, in the West is Europe. So the more you go south and east, people look more towards Russia for their ethnic inspiration. And linguistically, they speak more Russian. The more you go north and west, people look now towards the West for their ethnic inspiration, and they speak more their own Ukrainian language. But it's everything in between. You cannot put a line. It's not like a usual national minority that you have distinct lines between the majority and the minority, or the two communities, let's say, like in the case of Cyprus, for example, or in other ethnic conflicts where you have, for example, in Cyprus, you have two communities. I speak about Cyprus because you know the Cyprus problem. So in Cyprus, we have two communities that they are in conflict. Because, you know, this problem of Ukraine is kind of similar with the Cyprus problem, like most of the ethnic conflicts, I think. So in Cyprus, you have the Greeks, which are Christian Orthodox, that they speak the Greek language. And you have the Turks, which are Muslims, and they speak the Turkish language. Okay, Turkish language and Greek language, they are very different than each other. So you cannot say you have Greek speakers and Turkish speakers and everything in between. You can't. But
you immediately identify this is a Turkish person.
It's clearly who is Turkish.
And Greek.
Yeah, and linguistically, because they speak two totally distinct languages.
And they have different religion.
You cannot have everything in between in religion.
But in Russia, it's kind of complicated because they have all the same language and they look the same. So it's difficult to identify.
Okay. In the case of Cyprus, we look the same. So in some conflicts, like for example, in the conflicts of Burundi and Rwanda, I refer to this because I know you've been there. Between the
but you give example that I know. That
okay, I'm explaining to you that I don't feel that anybody else watched this. I explained to you. You wanted it to be publicly open, but anyway. I think these are two very classical examples. I mean, the Cyprus problem and the Rwanda-Burundi problem. In Rwanda, Burundi is kind of close to Ukrainian because people have the same language there, and they have the same religion there too. But there they have distinct, not very clearly, distinct physical features. They're supposed to be like, I think the Tutsis are the ones that they are more towards Semitic, Nilotic features, isn't it? And the Hudus are the ones that they look more like typical African, isn't it? Like that.
Not very
remember?
sure.
Anyway, the one of the two groups is more like supposed to be more tall, and I mean they look more Semitic, more like towards the Nilotic, like the Ethiopians or something. So the only distinct they can find is like physical characteristics. In the case of Ukraine, it's everything in between. You cannot say that this is a Ukrainian speaking or a Russian speaking Ukrainian from the features of the, physical features. Language is also not distinct because people there tend to speak both two languages. And even you have a mixed kind of language that is spoken in areas in between, which is not clear if it's Russian or Ukrainian, because these two languages are closely related. They are very, very, very close.
Are they?
Yeah, they're Slavic language.
So their language is very similar. Russian.
It's similar, so you can have an in-between language, which is not the case in Cyprus because the languages are not so similar.
So that's why it's a bit confusing for the people to understand.
It's confusing.
Who is who?
It's confusing to show that there are two communities, kind of in Ukraine. So it's like an invisible division, a kind of. It's like there is an invisible minority, let's say, in Ukraine. Anyway, so roughly this is a problem. So and the other part of the tweet is like it talks about Crimea, and it have some specific information like Crimea. It says Crimea formerly part of Russia, which used to be a part of Russia. Okay, Crimea was Russia until the 1950s.
So Elon Musk made a mistake.
No, he didn't make a mistake. But with the word Russia, it means the Russian, how you call it, Soviet Socialist Republic within the Soviet Union. So it's not the country Russia. It's a part of the Soviet Union, which was called like the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic. It's not a mistake. You can't call it Russia.
The Russia that he's talking about the Soviet Union back then.
Yeah, a kind of a state.
Which it's not exactly the same like it's today. Because the Soviet Union fell.
Yeah, but okay, it was a part of Russia until 1950s, which means a part of the same country, Soviet Union. Ukraine was another one of these 14
what?
Soviet Union was comprised
with
14 states, a kind of
4-0 or 1-4?
1-4.
1-4.
I think. Anyway, something like that. Soviet Socialist Republics, and one was Russia, and the other one was Ukraine as a part of the same state, same country. And during the 1950s, for practical reasons, the Soviet government decided to shift this region, Crimea is this kind of peninsula in the south of. When you talk about history, you need to show the map anyway.
And I will have maps here prepared for you.
Yeah,
for you guys to see, and because he's saying he knows history very well, and he's telling me when you don't have a map close to you when you are talking about history.
Wait. Google Maps.
Because actually it's cool because you need to see where the place is, what happened, and to understand.
You know what? Whenever somebody tries to explain you history, and there is no need to show the map, then something is wrong. Either the person tries to, not to explain you, to fool you or whatever, not to explain you the history, or is so skillful historian that he can do it without the map.
But the people that they are listening, they cannot comprehend without the map.
They could if this is ideally skillful historian, but I think whenever you talk about history, every moment you need to have the map in front of you. So this is Ukraine. This is like the western part. This is the northwestern part, southeastern part. The more you go to this direction is where you found more like.
This is what we were saying before.
The more this direction is, you found people that they are more close to Russian kind of. Not Russian identity. They never say that they are Russian. They say Ukrainians, but they seek their inspiration through their historical ties with Russia and linguistical. Their language, which is more Russian. The more you go to the north and east, you find the people that they identify themselves more with the West. They identify with their difference with Russians. Here they stress their similarities with Russia, and more towards here they stress their differences with Russia. That's the main part of their identity. So they identify more with the West. They say we are Europeans. They identify more with the West. Anyway, and Crimea is this like peninsula here, which was
interesting.
A part of
all that down the sea.
This peninsula. So this peninsula here was a part of the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic until.
Is it one of the 14, or that was
the peninsula? No, the peninsula. It was just a part of. It was part of Russia until the 50s, and then the central government of the Soviet Union decided that it's more practical, because obviously it's closer to Ukraine. I mean, you can see it. It's more practical to shift it in this state of the country, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic. And
but back then it was everything kind of part of Russia.
Yeah, no, part of the Soviet Union. We shouldn't call it Russia, because Russia was a part of the Soviet Union.
So Elon Musk made a mistake calling it Russia.
No, it's not a mistake. It's like it was called Russia. I mean, but as a region, as a state of the country.
So it was like the United States of America.
And California is the one, and the other is like Texas, and what I don't know what is neighboring to California anyway. Anyway, two neighboring states, and there's
Arizona.
Okay. If there's a part of Arizona, and the federal government decided to shift this part for practical reasons, it is something internal. Anyway, and
so back then it was the same thing. Ukraine.
It wasn't a big deal. It was not like changing a country.
It was like giving to Arizona one part of of California.
Because it's more,
not a big deal. It's still in the same country, the same
not
people.
Such a big deal, yeah. And Elon is calling this Khrushchev's mistake, because Khrushchev was the Secretary General, like the president of Soviet Union in that time. So he called it mistake, this act was
of giving Crimea to Ukraine.
Of shifting it, It was practical reasons.
That's a bold statement for Elon to say.
You can't say it mistake. It was just a miscalculation, maybe. But anyway, it was practical. It makes more sense because it's more closely. I mean, now there's a breach here, but then it was no breach. So it was more. I mean, for geographical reasons, this region was more close to. I mean, it was more easy. The access was easier to Ukraine than to Russia. There you should go by boat or something. So
tell me a bit more about the president of
the Secretary General was this particular one, Khrushchev. What do you want to know about him? It's not so relevant. I mean, he was a good. It's not.
It was the time.
I don't care if he was good or not. I mean, he was Soviet. It's not a part of this. I mean, we don't care about it. Do you care? I mean, I don't have an opinion about him. He was a nice guy. I don't really like the Soviet Union so much as a state. But anyway, the other thing here is this. There's a date here, 1783. Okay, in 1783. Obviously, there was no Soviet Union. I mean, Soviet Union started its existence in the 1920s.
Interesting.
So before the 1920s, it was the Russian Empire. So when you say Russia, if it's before the 1920s, you mean the Russian Empire, which was there for centuries. When it's after the 1920s, the same word Russia kind of mean. Sometimes we say Russia for the whole Soviet Union, which is wrong, or is the part of the Soviet Union that was called Russian Soviet Socialist Republic.
So Russia was one of the 14 states.
Yeah. And after the 1990, when was dissolved the Soviet Union, Russia became an independent country.
Interesting.
So the same word can mean these three things. Okay, what happened in 1783? Okay, this is a big difficult. So we need to talk about like real history now. I mean, if you want me to understand, to make you understand what means
hardcore history.
Not hardcore, I mean regular history. Okay, water supply to Crimea is, I don't care about this. Is not history. And okay, Ukraine remains neutral.
What does he mean by water supply to Crimea? Sure.
I don't really care about this because it's not. I mean, I care about water to Crimea, but I guess it's because. I mean, I guess Ukraine gets its water from Ukraine, not from Russia, because it's closer anyway. I don't know. So Elon means that after the solution, whatever.
That's fine. Elon just was sitting on the toilet writing this, and we analyze every word like it's a
yeah, but you know, millions of people watched it, and it was a reaction by President Zelensky. I mean, of course, whenever Elon talks, I mean, the world listens, so it's not just a joke anyway. But water supply to Crimea means, okay, assured, whatever the solution of the problem, Crimea needs water anyway. So,
yeah,
so.
But I don't understand
because the water, if Crimea remains to Russia, then they will need somehow water anyway. And if this is another country and this is another country, after the solution, Ukraine have to assure that we will give Crimea water, whatever happens, even before solution or after solution.
And this happened in 1780.
No, the water. No, 1783 is something that is. Crimea is a part of Russia since 1783, and I will explain to you this afterwards when I will explain history. I mean, more deeply. Okay, and Ukraine remains neutral. This is politics. So this is water, and this Ukraine remains neutral. I don't care, but I want to explain you the history of the things anyway. I mean, you understand that Ukraine remains neutral is a political statement. What means Ukraine remains neutral? Not in the side of Russia, not in the side of the West, which means NATO, but neutral. I mean, this is clearly understood. Okay, the two first are the interesting ones. So the thing is that this topic is a bit hot now. I mean, it's obvious. It's hot. And now it's a war going on there. People are dying. Russia is the aggressor. I mean they made first the invasion. So if I want to be neutral, some people will expect for somebody not to be neutral and accuse the Russians all the time and take the side of the Ukrainian government. It's not my intention now to take any side. I will try to be neutral, and not to be misunderstood. I will start with a statement. The statement is just Slava Ukraina. Slava Ukraina means glory to Ukraine, and I want to declare that if I things that I say sounds more like against Ukrainian official narrative, I want to declare that I really admire Ukrainian culture, Ukrainian history. Actually, I adore this part of the world. I really love this part of the world. I don't want to offend anybody who believes different things, but I think the word glory and the word I'm afraid the truth are not much together. So if you believe that your nation is glorious, then you are not afraid to say the truth. Even if you are not afraid to confront any lie, that if I say lies, whatever. So I believe Ukrainian nation, Ukraine is so glorious that they shouldn't be afraid of any truth. They don't need to fabricate anything. I mean, their history is clear, and when you feel that your nation is glorious, then you are not afraid to face the truth. So anyway, I apologize if somebody misunderstands. I don't want to offend anybody, but this is how I understand history, and I'm not a specialist.
With that being said,
so
dive into it.
Okay, so how long deep inside time you want me to?
We're
Can
just
I go like
started.
thousands of years or I mean, okay. Okay, can I go
Yeah.
thousands of years?
Yeah.
Or like,
History is history.
okay. No, because it's a bit far away to understand. I mean, to explain 1783, and you need to go like 500 AD, which roughly there is the earliest thing that you can say about Ukrainian history, I think. Is okay with you? I mean,
Yes.
we have time.
I approve.
Okay, so I prepare some maps here. This is what I was talking about, this division of the country. You know, in history, it's always good idea to look for sources that they don't look like so much directly related to history. It's more like more indirect, are kind of more genuine. So let's talk a little bit for the recent history of Ukraine now. I will not exceed the year 2013 when everything what's happening now in Ukraine started, kind of. Okay, the big thing started like 10 months ago with the invasion, but this was happening now. I don't want to go. I said to myself, I will not exceed the limit of 2013 because these things are happening still now, and I mean, history cannot deal with them. I mean, you need some distance in time to understand, I mean, and talk about this. So I don't want to talk about those years, but I mean, the years before, I think it can be said. So how someone can see that really there is this division in Ukraine? Okay, if you go there, you will see that the more you go south and east, you hear around you more Russian. The more you go north and west, the more you hear around you Ukrainian language. This is clear. But if you, okay, a good way to like see roughly this cultural division of the country is through the electoral history. So
which means
I went to Wikipedia and tried to see the results of the elections after the year 2000. So why I decide the year 2000? I mean, roughly around the year 2000, you see the first political manifestation of this division. Until the year 2000, roughly, the government of Ukraine was aligned with Russia. I mean, they were like allies or subordinate, you can say, I don't know how to say. I mean, they were in agreement with Russia. The first voices that started appearing saying that we don't want to be like a puppet kind of, or, I mean, we want to be an independent player than Russia, which means we want to see towards the west because there's no other direction. I mean, in Ukraine, you either see westwards or eastwards. You watch towards Russia or towards the European Union. There's no other inspiration, pole of inspiration. Anyway, so this was a time when this appeared into existence with, this is a story related with two politicians, Viktor Yushchenko and Yulia Tymoshenko.
What time?
2000 around. So after the year 2000, this idea that some Ukrainians from before, and the more you go north and west, you found more Ukrainians that they would want Ukraine to be a part of the Western world. But it started to be politicized. So after this year, you see even in politics, two kind of political parties. The one looks towards the west and the other towards the east. So if we go to, I found some, the election result, and I will, many elections anyway, but if you start from the year 2002, the parliamentary elections, and you watch the results, you don't need to know what's going on. You see,
it's pretty clear.
Different thing here and different thing here. So
what's the blue and the purple?
We don't need to explain this now. This is a kind of communist party. These are the more close towards Russia, and these are the parties
So this is the results of the
Yeah,
of the
more.
vote. So you clearly see here
There is a line,
Ukraine is divided
kind of.
in two opinions.
So if you go to the presidential elections of 2004, 2004 is the year of the first kind of real revolution. They call it Ukraine. They call it Orange Revolution. But I don't need to go to details anyway now, because I'm more interested in the more distant past. So we see again. I mean, this is the final round. The two rivals. I mean, the pro-Western, pro-Eastern, Yanukovych and Yushchenko. Again, you see this kind of line here. You don't need to explain. Now, this is the more pro-Russian and the more. So if you go to any election, I mean, I found many here. I mean, 2006 parliamentary election, again, similar. I mean, again, you see this line here, which is not now time to explain.
Very interesting.
2007,
the same thing.
Similar thing. 2010, this is Yulia Tymoshenko, this is again Yanukovych. Okay, there are many things that should be said about those things, but it's not my intention now to. So we see again this line. And okay, this line goes 12 parliamentary. Again, the line.
This is 2012.
12 now, another election, and it's enough to go like until here, because I say I will not exceed the year 2013, when the revolution of dignity started in Ukraine. I mean, things became very hot. I don't want to go. So, okay, this was just to persuade you that there is a kind of a line there. And this is like results of elections. So it cannot be, it's not official history. So we believe that there are kind of truth. I mean, they cannot be fraud, all these elections. Some of them were under pro-Russian government, some of them are, I mean, Ukrainian government, some of them were under pro-Western pro-Western government. So, I mean, nobody can deny that this is a fact, that there is a kind of a line, that there are two distinct identities in Ukraine. But I will stress again that both these people believe that they are Ukrainians. They say we are Ukrainians. Even if they speak Russian, you could call them Russian-speaking or Russophile, but they're Ukrainians. They look like Russian. If they speak Russian, if their names are Russian, if their religion is Russian, even in religious terms, the country is divided. I mean, there are two churches. The one is autocephalous, and the other is tied to the Russian Patriarchate. So people in the south and east of Ukraine, they look identical to Russian. If they speak Russian, they are tied to the same church, they have the same religion, they have the same faces, they have the same names, but there is an element which is important. They say, I'm Ukrainian, which is important. So they are a different kind of, it's like the other Ukraine. And I will stress again that whatever the outcome of this war is, even like the victory of Ukraine and the Russians go outside every part of Ukraine, even Crimea, then these two kinds of, these communities must find a way to reconcile. Anyway.
Which is very difficult.
It's like in the case of Cyprus, it's like in the case of every conflict, but to have reconciliation, you need the truth. Like truth and reconciliation go together. So it's not possible to have the Ukraine of the future with the Western Ukrainians just deny that these people are, I mean, they have this kind of cultural inspiration, that they are just wrong and that they have to become like us,
This is
or
what
the other
Zelensky...
or the other way around. I don't want to mention names now so much. This is what, I mean, Zelensky is a person. I don't want to talk about people. Western Ukrainians want to see Eastern Ukrainians be more like them, perhaps the other ones want them to be like them. I think the country have to recognize the fact that there are two kinds of Ukrainians, both proud to be Ukrainians, that in the country there are two languages. You can't deny that some people speak Russian language. I mean, this is their language. I mean, unless, I don't know now, that maybe now after the war they change their mind, most of them, but still you have people that in the Donetsk and Lugansk region and in Crimea, 8 years now they live under Russian. So I don't really believe that they change their mind, that they decide to change their language from Ukrainian into Russian. So anyway, they will have to face this. And I think that, and you know, the media don't show up this thing. I mean, in the media, everybody, I mean, the mainstream media, everybody talks about one unified single Ukrainian people. They are one people because they say they are. But this cultural difference and linguistic difference is important anyway. But I cannot say in which extent now, because after the war and after all these things that happen, maybe people change their mind. I don't want to say. Anyway, let's dive into history now to explain you what is, to you and to the, I tend to forget that there are people around. I thought it's just you. Okay. So I think a good way to start talking about history, it's about language, because nations which anyway, the national identity is based mainly on language, isn't it? I mean, religion and language are the two factors. Nations is more like a modern and more like imagined concept, the nation. But language is genuine. I mean, you can't deny that. Language is not a human construct. Language is a natural construct. So
we take language and we find the truth there.
Yeah, through language, I think is better than through the idea of the nation itself.
Yeah, because nation doesn't exist. It's something
construct. It's imagined. Yeah,
but language is alive.
Language is kind of real thing. It's not imagined. So I like to base in maps, not only maps, but dynamic maps. So this is a map of the history of European languages. And it starts very, very, very back in 4000 BC.
So this is England?
This is England. This is England. This is Britain. Anyway. Okay, here is Ukraine.
Yes.
You don't need to go so back. Now it's like 3600 BC. You don't need to go this back to understand Ukrainian history.
This is before Christ.
Before Christ and before everything, you see only Proto-Indo-European. If you want me, I can start from this time, but I think it's so irrelevant that. Okay, you have the Indo-European languages, and one of the branches of the Indo-European language is the Slavic languages. So, okay, this scene now here shows that the Indo-European started from this point, that they spread around Europe, but this is not so relevant. It's better to start when you see this word Slavic. So, Indo-European languages.
Wow.
Like, you know, there is another thing I want to show. This is a picture of the European languages. Okay. And why you laugh? Because you understand nothing about it.
He was telling me that he was looking at this picture for like hours.
I like linguistics so much. Anyway, so these are the European languages, and you see three main kind of concentrations of things.
Oh my God, I love this. We're talking about history and we're learning linguistics now as well. It's beautiful.
Historical linguistics, I mean, linguistics and I mean, history is so much tied to languages because, I mean, this is the real, I mean, nations, I told you, are construct, but language is there anyway. So these are the languages of Europe. And you see three main families. The one is what we call Latin languages, which is Italian, French. This is their distance, kind of linguistic, lexical distance. So if you see the picture closer to each other, it means that they are more related. They are more mutually intelligible. So this like Italian, Spanish, Portuguese are closer to Spanish than to French. Catalan, Romanian is distant than ever, but these are all Latin. If you go to the Germanic languages, you have English, you have Dutch, which is closer to English than German, and then you have the Scandinavian ones, which are far away from the others, but you look how close is Norwegian with Danish, Swedish a bit further away, Icelandic. So this is a small family. The Baltic languages, just two languages, Latvian and Lithuanian, Latvian. Greek alone, our language.
It's not close to anything.
Yeah, because Greek is like an own language, like Albanian. And this is the family that we're interested now. This is the Slavic languages. Russian, Ukrainian, Polish, Czech, Belarusian. This part is more interesting for us now. Russian, Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Polish for some reason. So Ukrainian, Belarusian, and Russian is a branch of the Slavic languages, which is a branch of the Indo-European languages. So you have the family Indo-European, those languages plus Iranian and Indian, which makes the Indo-European family. It's a detail. One branch of this is the Slavic languages, which is divided into the Eastern Slavic languages, which is Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian. Western, which is like Polish, Czech, and Slovak. And Southern, Bulgarian, Serbian, Slavic Macedonian, and with Serbian, Serbo-Croatian, it's like a family you can see very, very close to each other. It's Serbian, Croatian, and Bosnian. It used to be one language. You see how close they are.
Yeah.
And then you have Slovene. Okay, so Slavic language, they have three branches. The Eastern, which is what we are interested, Russian, Ukrainian, and Belarusian. Western, Polish, Czech, and Slovak. We are interested especially in Polish. So you see Ukrainian is between Russian and Polish for some reason.
And actually, this is like, how is it in the map as well?
No, this is how it's, okay, kind of, because the geographical proximity shows some linguistic proximity, isn't it? It's more likely to talk similar to somebody who lives closer to you. Yeah, but this is not the map of Europe, obviously.
Yeah.
Okay. Greek is between those two. I mean, Greece is here.
It's not the rule.
Yeah, but if you take the same family, because in linguistics you have this what we call a mutual intelligibility. So you cannot have mutual intelligibility between languages that they are distant. So, okay, there is a kind of lexical distance. This is lexical distance. This is not generally linguistic distance. But it shows the mutual intelligibility anyway. But if you have no intelligibility, you don't talk with each other. I mean, somebody with Greek cannot try to talk to anybody from them or from, I mean, the Germanic languages, the Latin languages. But between them, they can have a conversation. So that's why you see these clusters of language. I mean, they can kind of communicate, but among them, difficult. Anyway, you can't come with your English and start talking with somebody in Russia. There are some words that they will understand.
So someone that speaks Italian can understand French, Italian.
If we okay, this is just lexical. It's not in language. You don't have just words. You have also other features, grammar. But if we take this as a general linguistic distance, it's easier to understand if you are Spanish. It's easier to understand somebody who speaks Italian than somebody who speaks French. But they can try to have a conversation like Italians with Spanish. They could. I mean, kind of. They will understand each other, kind of. What percentage? This means distance, anyway. So the more they understand each other, the more closer is the language.
Okay.
For example,
but the case... Ukrainians and Russians can understand each other if they don't know any... one person knows only Russian.
Can understand until a certain extent, but the thing is in Ukraine, because everybody speaks Russian. And... They have even this code switching. Sometimes they shift from Russian to Ukrainian because so many years, I mean, during Soviet Union, Ukrainian speakers were all bilingual. I mean, the perfect Russian speakers. So it's tricky. If you want to see this, you should go to like Ukrainian immigrants that they left many years ago and they went to Canada or the US. And I mean, the third generation now, they had no contact with Russian. Then you will find the purely Ukrainian speakers, and if you put them with Russians, then you will see that it's not so close as it looks like. But in Ukraine, anybody in Ukraine can communicate with a Russian person because they speak Russian. Anyway, it's like in the case of Cyprus, you know. In Cyprus, we have the Cyprus dialect. Can you define how close it is to the Greek language? You can't really, because every Cypriot speaker can speak Greek. So you can't really know if somebody speaks only Cypriot language. For example, we have some speakers in Cyprus. I mean, the Turkish Cypriot that they speak, we have some villages, I don't know if you know it, some Turkish Cypriot villages, they are Greek speaking. And they all people speak more Greek, I mean, among themselves. Okay, if you ask such a person that they speak like the Cyprus dialect, and they don't speak the Greek standardized Greek language, that the one that we learn at school. And if you ask them, do you understand the news? They would tell you, not really. Perhaps nothing. So there you can see that our dialect is a kind of distant from Greek, but you cannot see because you speak both languages. So it's the same kind of Ukrainian and Russian. And anyway, the languages are not far away from each other. Everybody is bilingual, practically.
The alphabet is closer.
The alphabet is also similar, which is another indication of, I mean, alphabet.
Of what?
Alphabet. I mean, it's interesting you mention alphabet. Alphabet is even more genuine indication of history than the language itself.
Okay. Why?
It's because the alphabet you choose to write your language, it shows first shows the religious affiliation. So Muslims tend to write in Arabic script, Catholics tend to write in Latin script, and Orthodox tend to write in Cyrillic script. And Greek, okay, Greek, but Greek is just for Greeks. So, and the fact that the Turks now, they don't use the Arabic script is a kind of dissonance in this. Or the Romanians, they don't use the Cyrillic script, which was the case until the 19th century. It's also a kind of dissonance.
What you are saying basically is like with the alphabet, you choose to have the alphabet and the letter and that is closer to who you feel you are.
Kind of,
and
yeah.
who you feel you want to be.
And it's more genuine. So this is another interesting indication for Ukrainian.
Tell me about Ukrainian
alphabet. The Ukrainian alphabet is Cyrillic. If the Ukrainians were always aspiring to be close to the West so much, which alphabet do you think they would have to write their language? Which, the Cyrillic or Arabic or What?
What is the thing of Russia?
Russia is Cyrillic alphabet.
So I guess Cyrillic.
Cyrillic is when you feel closer to Russia.
And the other one is
What is the other option? What do you think? I'm asking you now. I'm checking you now.
European.
European, which is which alphabet?
Scandinavian.
The Latin one.
Latin.
Latin language. I mean, like English alphabet, Italian alphabet, Polish alphabet. So the fact that Ukrainians until now they have the Cyrillic alphabet and not the Latin one, like their neighboring Polish, it shows something about.
So Poland has closer to Europe.
Yeah.
How we say Latin?
Latin alphabet.
Latin alphabet. Okay. So Poland has closer to Latin.
Polish people are Catholic anyway. So you wouldn't expect them to have the Arabic alphabet because they are not Muslims, the Cyrillic alphabet because they are not Orthodox. Okay, the Ukrainians could have the Latin alphabet like their neighboring Romanians, which although they are Orthodox, they shifted during the 19th century to the Latin alphabet. That's why today Romanian language is written not in Cyrillic which was the alphabet which used to be written until the 19th century. And they have the Latin one. And this is an indication that these people...
From what time they started having the
Cyrillic alphabet? Since they started writing their language, which is also an interesting moment.
When they started?
I think they started writing their language sometime in the course of the 19th century. They started writing their distinct Ukrainian language.
That's a lot later.
Yeah, but it's a part of the later than what?
What I thought it would be. I thought it would be like when the first written language was.
In history.
Yeah.
Come on, don't go so far. So I mean, this is too much. We don't need to shift. I mean, to deviate so much from our subject, but many. I mean, 3,000-4,000 BC, like
Okay.
I mean
But Ukraine had the
hieroglyphic and
the ceramic language, Cyrillic language, adapted it at the 19th century.
Cyrillic language started to exist since the 7th. No.
How many years ago?
9th century started the Cyrillic script, and it was invented by the Greeks in order to Christianize the Slavs. Mm-hmm. You know, the Saint Cyril and Methodius. That's why it's called Cyrillic. It's after Saint Cyrillus and Methodius, the two Byzantine Greek missionaries that they were sent by the Byzantines to Christianize the Slavs, and they invented this alphabet in order to write down the Slavic idioms spoken by the Slavs. But anyway, if you don't know history, all this seems to you like a puzzle without understanding what's going on. So let me start from the beginning. And the beginning of okay, let's finish this with the alphabet. So the fact that the Ukrainians in the course of the 19th century chose to write their language in the Cyrillic alphabet is an interesting moment and shows a kind of affiliation towards Russia. Because otherwise they would have chosen the Latin alphabet. And when we say about Ukrainians, in that time, in the course of the 19th century, what is today Ukraine was like divided, half of it, and as you might guess, is like the south and east part, kind of more, it was a part of Russian Empire, and the northwest was a part of Austria in that time. It was a part of anyway Western countries for a long time, but you will see that in when I will explain history. So despite that fact, both Ukrainian parts, I mean the ones that they were living in Austria and the ones that they were living under in Russian Empire showed a desire, an inclination towards the Cyrillic script. Even, okay, the ones that they live in Russia, it's obvious. I mean,
and who choose what alphabet?
The intellectuals of the community, the intelligentsia of the community, sometimes the state. But, okay, the Eastern Ukrainians, they were living under Russia when they chose the alphabet. So the intelligentsia of the Ukrainians living in Russia, let's show them up. This was a part of, I mean, for many centuries, Poland and Lithuania, but in the 19th century, this was a part of Austria, and this was a part of Russia, roughly. So the intelligentsia here, which was a part of Russia, was expected when they decided to write their language, their idiom. It was obvious that they would choose which alphabet. The Cyrillic, because they were living in Russia. But the interesting thing is that also they chose the Cyrillic alphabet here. They were living in Austria, the intellectuals here. And actually there was a conflict. I think some of them wanted the Latin alphabet because Austria and Poland and the countries, and Lithuania, the countries that they were under the influence for centuries, those people here, they use which alphabet? Of course, they're Catholics. They use until today the Latin one. But despite that fact, a big part of the intelligentsia of the Western Ukrainians, they decided to use the Cyrillic alphabet, which is an indication that shows that even them, they were like, but it's not surprising because they were Orthodox. So in that time, they wouldn't feel the Russians as something distinct and an enemy. They would look like with sympathy towards the Russian part of their identity, kind of.
I like it. I like so much that we don't think about what is Ukraine, what is the nation, who is who, and we just take it linguistically and we find some answers there
because it's
a
genuine. It's more genuine, I think.
It's
anyway.
kind of, you take the facts, it's not the conspiracy theory. And
it's not something fabricated, or it's the will of the people. But anyway, what matters now is the will of the people today, anyways. And I know for sure the people of Ukraine now here, definitely they look towards the West, and they don't want to. I mean, they stress their differences with their Slavic relative Russian, and they look towards the West. This is undeniable. But it wasn't always like this, and that's how history goes anyway. So that's why I said in the beginning, I don't want to be misunderstood, because I respect what people believe today, and the history is not so important. The most important thing is that what people want today, the desire of the people. But you need to understand the truth. And if you are a glorious nation like Ukraine, you shouldn't be afraid of whatever the history is, because you believe in the glory of your nation anyway. So
you think it's not relevant what happened in the past?
It's relevant, but the will of the people is most important. So if somebody start talking, but the Ukrainians...
This is what Elon Musk, back to Musk, he said that we need to have a referendum from UN for the people.
The referendum speak about the peoples here, which are anyway Eastern Ukrainians. Now I'm talking about the Western Ukrainians. But if I was a biased historian and tried to say, no, but Ukrainians were always close to Russia. Look, they chose in that time the Cyrillic alphabet. It doesn't matter so much. What matters is the will of the people now. And nobody can deny, from at least Western Ukrainians, that they look towards the West. This is clear. Whatever alphabet they chose, whatever, you know what I mean. But it's you can't deny historically.
But you don't need to go... So that's another argument. Should you go back to history and see the
You should
roots,
go back to history to understand.
Or you should just follow the will of the people now, and that's it.
First of all, the will of the people, and then to understand what's going on. So I cannot say to Ukrainians now, look, you're closer to Russian because you chose the Cyrillic alphabet, it's not my business. I mean, if they chose for whatever reason to look towards the West, this is what matters. I mean, the will of the people. Anyway, let's go back to history now. So, if you want to understand what's going on, you start.
Make it a bit bigger.
Whenever you see, you start whenever you see this word Slavic. So, for example, now we are. When do we see first? Interesting. When do we see first in this map? I checked this map, and I mean, you cannot trust whatever you found in the internet. But I checked before with my poor historical knowledge, and I checked it, and according to me, it's kind of accurate. So you go back like 12,000 years BC, and you see Slavic. When you see Slavic first time? Proto-Slavic, Balto-Slavic. So you see, now it's one family. So Baltic language is like Lithuanian and Latvian. So if you go like 2,000 years before, you can't find any distinction. But anyway, these are guesses because we don't really know. I mean, if you don't have written records, we don't really know. So this is nothing accurate. Accurate, when you talk about Slavic people, what means accurate history? It's like when you go to 400, it's a safe time to start talking about Slavic people. I told you before, Slavic people today are Ukrainians, Belarusians, Russians, Polish, Czechs, Slovaks, Bulgarians, Serbian, Croatian, etc. Back then, it was just here. Interestingly enough, this is now a part of Ukraine. So if you want to be proud, you can't. I mean, if you want to say where all these Slavic people started, now is Ukraine. So you can't deny that. I mean, Ukrainian identity Ukrainian history is deep, because
deep. You say.
I mean, Ukrainian. If you want to identify anybody of today's Slavs closer to the core of Slavic identity, the first core of the Slavs was somewhere where is now Ukraine. So Ukrainians are like close to the roots anyway. But this is not important because people are moving anyway. This was just the fact that, interestingly enough, the Slavs started where is now Ukraine for some reason. It's not so relevant anyway. Do you understand what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Kind of. Okay. So we start learning about the Slavs when they start expanding. So if we move like 50 years, you see them a bit, not very much expanded.
Double.
But if you go 500, you see them more expanded. And they expand towards the west. So this is here now what is Poland, Polish people, kind of. But you cannot, if you go to 500, you cannot talk about Polish and Russian and Bulgarians. They are one thing. You can't distinguish between them. And you see them go towards the west. Eventually, we know until where they will reach, because you have Slavic people here now. So they will move more. In the south, you think they will reach south, or they will stay? I'm asking you now to see if you understand. They will go southern, you think, or
to Africa, to Greece.
To Greece, you have some Slavic people in Greek, Slavic speakings in Greek, but not that many. But here is Bulgaria, here is Serbia.
So it will.
So they will expand.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you kind of know where they will expand.
You kind of know because you know today what's going on.
You have,
Because you will eventually have the Serbians and the Bulgarians and the Croatians and the Slovenians and the Slovaks and already you have the Poles here. Anyway, but you can't distinguish among them. So you see a 500, let's go 550. Kind of not very different. 600.
Interesting.
You see, they go towards now to become the Russians, isn't it? Because they go more towards the east. So these are the proto kind of Russians, proto.
So Russia is here.
Yeah, Russia. Russia start. No, Russia, here is Belarus and Russia and kind of start. I can't see the country. I mean, Ukraine is until here roughly. Belarus and kind of Russia. But you see, these are like proto-Russians, proto-Poles and Slovaks, and proto-Bulgarians. Okay, the year 600.
And as if you notice, is more on the side of the Western Ukraine that is occupying the Slavic thing.
Okay, because
it doesn't go to the
because
Russia.
we are biased. If you would ask somebody where the Slavs started, we are biased because which is the biggest and the most famous and most notable Russian nation now? I told it, a Slavic nation now. The Russians, bigger and more. I mean, when you say Slavs, first the word Russia comes to you. So you would expect the origin of the Slavs to be somewhere here, I mean, in Russia, isn't it? But it's not like this. I mean, anyway, but these are not very strong historical facts because the Slavic people then they had no historical records, and very rarely other people with historical records mentioned them before the year 400 AD. So you can really talk about the Slavic history after the year 500 because they start expanding towards where? Towards people that they had language and they left historical records about these invaders.
Such an interesting thing.
So when the Slavs invade you, then you talk about them and you write about them and you leave historical records about them.
And this is how we know about it.
That's how we know. Before the year 400, 500, very rarely somebody would talk about them because they were not interested. Maybe somebody traveled through their lands and say a couple of words, but if the people themselves, they don't write, and if nobody else write about them, you don't know so much. Anyway, so the year 600, you should know it as a Greek because it's also interesting about our history. The Slavs started to invade the Eastern Roman Empire. You say where is say Koine Greek is where Greek is speaking, which is roughly the Byzantine Empire in that time. So we don't see it here now, but roughly where is this color of Greek is where is the Byzantine Empire. I don't like to use the word Byzantine because it wasn't Byzantine, it was Roman anyway. So anyway, people know that with this word, they were Romans anyway. So this is the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire. And when they started invade them, they came together with the Avars, another tribe. It was not a Slavic tribe, it was maybe more Turkic tribe, but they came together and they start raiding Byzantium. And so we know about them a lot because the Byzantines, the Romans liked very much to keep records, as you know. They write a lot about what's going on. So we know a lot about them after the year 600 because the Byzantines talk about these weird invaders that they came from the north. They used to cross the Danube River and go to raid Byzantium with the Avars. So if we go to the year 650, you already see.
Oh, they took a big part.
So now they went where they are now, roughly. They are here in Poland and Slovakia and okay, here is Germany. They are not now there, but you see them occupying the place where they are now, roughly. And in the south, it looks very much like where they are now, isn't it? I mean, Bulgarians and Serbians and even inside Greece. Anyway. So, do you remember the Akathistos Hymnos?
Yeah.
So, this Akathistos Hymnos, it talks about this event, exactly. I don't remember when it was, like the year 630 or something like that, when the Avars, together with their Slav big companions, I mean, I think the Avars were more the leaders and the Slavs were more like the kind of soldiers. But it were Avars and Slavs reached until Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Byzantine Roman Empire, and they reached until the walls of the town, and they were like surrounding the town, and the Byzantine, our ancestors, the Byzantines, they were inside the town praying to the mother of Jesus, Panagia, Holy Mary, to help them because of these invaders. And at the end, they were victorious. They couldn't occupy the capital. And to thank the Mother of God for this help that gave them, they composed this ακάθιστος ύμνος, ακάθιστ. It says it's υπερμάχος στρατηγό, τα νικητήρια. It names Panagia as an army general, strategos. Why army general? Because it was under her command, kind of spiritual command, that our army fought against the Avar and Slavs and win. So you see, even when people keep records, you can even find them until today, sung in the churches. So until today, we talk about the Slavs in our churches, which is very alive history, isn't it? So it was a commemoration of exactly this expansion. Here is Constantinople. Anyway, so, but you see the maps here talk about Slavs. So until now, we cannot separate between Slavs. They are just Slavs. So if you go another 50 years, you see now there is a division now. Okay, 750, you have East and West Slavs and South Slavs. So since the year 700 roughly, you start have indications that they already linguistically, they start to be distinct. Okay. So until today, we divide them like Eastern Slavs. Which are the Eastern Slavs? Ukrainians, Russians, and Belarusians today, and some other small names. I mean, I say on the big nations. And Poles, Slovaks, and Czechs, and Bulgarians, Serbians, and Croatians, and Slovaks, and Slovenes.
Interesting.
Anyway, so now you can talk about East Slavs and West Slavs, but still you don't see any division between the constituent parts of them. I mean, they're just Eastern Slavs, okay? But the division is still linguistic, because by this moment, okay, roughly by this moment, if you go a bit before, like by this moment, all Slavs are pagans, roughly, until the year 600, until the year 800, the Slavs are roughly pagans. Because then, I'm not wrong, Saint Cyrillus and Methodius, they were, I mean, the first attempts to Christianize the Slavs were like 9th century, if I'm not wrong. 9th century attempts, yeah. 830, 800, anyway. So until this moment, 750 and 800, all Slavs are pagan, which means they still have the old pagan Slavic religion. So the history of the Christianization of the Slavs, it's a kind of revival, I mean, it's a kind of rival, it's a competition, let's say, between the Byzantines, who wanted to make them their allies, to make them Orthodox. Okay, in that time it was not such a strong division between Orthodox and Catholics, but still you can talk about two churches, and let's call them Orthodox and Catholic. It's maybe a kind of it's not okay. Let's call them Catholics and Orthodox, not to make things more complicated. So it was kind of competition. The Byzantines wanted to make the Slavs Orthodox, and the Catholics wanted to take them with their side, to make them Catholics. And now you know the line where it is. I mean, the Poles are Catholics until today. The Slovaks are Catholics. The Czechs are Catholics. The Ukrainians, the Belarusians, and the Russians are Orthodox. So it starts becoming obvious. So if you move more another kind of 50 years, this is the year when you start talking about the Christianizations. First, the Byzantines sent missionaries, famously enough, Cyril and Methodius and others, to Christianize the Slavs. And okay, let's say 900, already you have the West kind of succeeding more, make them Catholics, but the Christianization of this part is like the year 1000. So if you reach the year 800, you have to talk also about politics. So it's not enough to talk about language now, because in the year, stop, let's go back. So in the year 850 roughly, come on, then now you have to start talking about politics, because, okay, you have the Eastern Slav, the Western Slavs, attempts to Christianize.
Both of them?
Mostly, not so much the Eastern Slavs, mostly the Western Slav, because they were far away by the West. The South Slavs, already by the Byzantines, not so much the Eastern Slavs. But we are more interested in the Eastern Slavs, isn't it? So now you have to talk about politics, because roughly around this year, a bunch of Vikings from Scandinavia were following the Dnieper River. Man, we're not talking so much about Ukraine. It's not. Is it okay talking about this?
This is the history.
It's a history, but I don't think we will finish if I start talking so much details. Anyway, you can edit some parts out.
No, this is a podcast of learning. So
learning for you, but
anything goes.
Somebody clicked to learn about Ukraine.
Yeah, but he needs to understand this.
Okay, they need to understand. I don't know. Anyway, so a bunch of Slavs, a bunch of Vikings, Germanic-speaking people, totally different than the Slavs, following the Dnieper River for commercial purpose. They were reaching those. Where is the Dnieper River? Somewhere here, anyway. You can see it. Dnieper River is very important for the history of Ukraine. If we reach that point, I don't. If we talk so detailed about the distant past, I don't know if we reach it. But anyway, so these Slavs, these Vikings, the Rurik Vikings or the Rus, were following this river, coming down for commercialism, passing through the Eastern Slavic lands. They established a state somewhere 850, I don't remember when, called the Kievan Rus, because they founded a town called Kiev, which is
now Kiev
related to Ukrainian history now, so it sounds more like Ukrainian history. So they established this town called Kiev. They established a dynasty which was not Slavic. They were like Germanic speaking, like talking a language which is closer to like Swedish, I guess, or Norwegian. And they established their authority upon the Slavic people here. So
are we going to see it?
No, you see only the language. So if you want to see this, you have to shift to another map. I'm not an expert. I'm sure I miss out important facts, but
nobody knows everything.
No, but I hope that I'm sure I made some mistakes and some omissions and some important things I don't say. But my goal now is to reveal the big picture. So I hope the big picture is kind of.
For me, this
is kind of shown up. Anyway, so this is another one of my favorite maps in YouTube. This is the history of Europe. Let's make it bigger. So now we're in the year 400 BC. It's not interesting, isn't it? So when do we have to start, you think? What do you want?
900.
Why not again 500 to see what's going on?
Okay.
Just to see if we were right. Isn't it to verify what I said before? Because I'm not sure even myself. Anyway, so this is every year. The other one is like every 50 years. can I shift it like this? Oh, I can.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So this is the year 500 where we start. So here is the land of, here is Ukraine. Here in Western Ukraine was the origin of the Slavs, as we saw. So you see nothing here political. You see Slavs, but there's nothing political here. So this is the land of the uncivilized, a word I hate, but it's the land of people that they have.
Because they didn't have written stuff.
This is more civilized for me anyway. I respect more people without written stuff than people with. You know that I don't like what happens after the agricultural revolution, but this is another thing. And the invention of script. Anyway, it's another thing. It's a peculiarity of mine. But they are so-called, where you see colors in this map is the civilized so-called world, and here is the uncivilized, which is more civilized. But anyway, but you see nothing here. No political configuration, because we don't really know. People were like happy without any government. Okay, I'm talking political now. Anyway, they had some tribal organization, I'm sure, but it was much more natural. Anyway, so let's fast forward until we see any color, isn't it? Now we're moving until we see colors here, isn't it?
Yes.
The Byzantine, you see the Western countries, the Western Roman Empire is not.
This is not language. This is just where.
This is political maps. But if you see no colors, means no written language. Because written language and state, an organized state goes together anyway. So people here are more like pagans.
Interesting.
They have more interesting religions, more pagan religions. They have more like natural life. I stress again, I respect them more anyway. So when we see colors here, then we are interested.
Okay, first color appears.
This is the Avars. We talked about the Avars before, isn't it? This is the year 500. It's already after 500. So this is the time when the Avars came to the land of the Slavs. It's interesting too. So if you go before 550, let's say, you don't see the Avars people, because the Avar people, they were like Turkic people, more related to the. We're not so sure. We don't really know what language the Avars were talking, but we guess. Most odds are towards that they were like Turkic speaking. Turkic people are always. The history of Europe and the history especially of Middle East and Anatolia is the history of. And Eastern Europe is the history of Turkic people coming from the east, from Mongolia, and this is the origin of the Turks, moving towards the west. This is for many years this happened. Turkic people moving eastwards to the west. So one of them were the Avars. But they were nomadic people. So even if you see I will stop it when they will appear. So even if you see color here, this is not exactly a settled state with towns, some towns of course, but this was like a Turkic nomad state. So these people were not settled, they were nomads. They had tents, they had horses, they were moving around. So this is a kind of political affiliation. It is a kind of state, this is a Turkic fashion of the nomads, but it's not geographical. So the nomad people, they have a kind of state, but it's not territorial. They have loyalties to their chief, the chief of the chiefs, the Kegans as they used to call them. But this is not, it's a peculiar kind of state. It's not a state based on geography. It's a state based on loyalty, and wherever you are, because you are a nomad. Nomad means, you know what means nomad? They're moving around. They're not settled. They're moving with their tents. So you have a loyalty towards your leaders, but you move anywhere, everywhere. So it's like a moving kind of country. So this is not exactly the borders of a state. It's like the places where these nomads were moving, the Avars. But the Avars came to the country of the Slavs, and they formed an alliance, a kind of. That's why you have them invading the Byzantines together. So they met very recently. I mean, they were not friends for many, many centuries ago. They became like allies some years before starting raiding the Byzantine Roman Empire. So if you, let's fast forward, 600, you see nothing political here. The Avars, you see the Avars, the Slavs. You see, so the Slavic people are here, but you still don't see any colors among them.
Yeah.
So
it's like the previous map, actually, because they went down in the previous.
Yeah, they went down, but with no car. So these years, like the year 700, they are entering even as far as Peloponnese. But because, so they are a part of this is Byzantium now. But they enter so much, it was a cataclysmic. I mean, there were many, many numerous. I mean, the sources talking about like huge number of people just crossing the Danube River and crossing the border. So this situation here is like where they are, and it's like no state. I mean, they're like they rule.
Mm-hmm.
Officially, this is Byzantium, but they don't. But there's no official Byzantine authority here. They do whatever they want. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, but here this is the land we're interested. Still, you don't see any state. So, not talking about the South Slavs so much now, because it's supposed to be not our interest. So, if you move, so this is the year 500. You see, already there is a country called Bulgaria here. So, these South Slavs with, I mean, okay, there's another people that called the Bulgars. They are Turkic people. They came from the east again, like the Avars. They form a state here called Bulgaria. No, it's another story anyway, which is it became Slavic, but anyway. But you see now the South Slavs start to be more organized. You don't see white anymore. You see colors here for some reason. And so up here is the Rus. So after the year
up.
So after the year 800, I don't remember, 880, whatever, I don't want to go back, appears this state I told you. So it was the Slavic people and the Scandinavians coming down, following this river. They established this state, the Rus. Capital of the Rus is Kiev. So this state is supposed to be the ancestor state where the modern Ukrainian and Belarusian and Russian nations were formed. Okay, many historians identify the Rus with the Russians, and the word is kind of similar, but I think it's wrong. I mean, it's not politically correct, at least. Okay, the biggest nation of today that came out this state, this political formation, is the Russians, obviously. But some of them call themselves Ukrainian, some of them call Belarusian, so you shouldn't call them Rus, like the ancestors of Russians, and that the Rus are the Russians, and the Rus are, it's a Russian state. So let's call it the Eastern Slavic, the state of the Eastern Slavs, which is, I think, is more neutral term for both of them, for all of them, like Belarusians, Ukrainians, and Russians. So this is the Rus now, and this is the state having capital as Kiev. Okay.
So Kiev is here now.
No, Kiev is inside the Rus. I mean, Kiev, I don't know, Kiev is somewhere here. So you see, it's expanded now, the state. And here are the Poles. But you don't see any state. The Poles are still not having a state, but the Slovaks have. So the Western Slavs, they're starting now to develop also states. Okay, so if now you have the first Poland. Now it's more obvious that you have the division roughly. Now these are the Eastern Slavs and these are the Western Slavs. Polish, Slovaks, and so around this here, you have the Christianization of the Poles. And who Christianized the Poles? What do you think? Constantinople or Rome? Rome, because why you said Rome? Why the Poles were Christianized by Rome and not by Constantinople?
Because it was.
Today they are Catholics or they are Orthodox. The Poles are Catholics.
Yeah, you're right.
So it makes sense.
Yeah.
So roughly this year, when Poland appeared, I don't remember when, 960 roughly as a state.
It's like a puzzle that you can confirm is true. Because what you see
you see today, it makes sense that the Poles were Christianized by Rome because they're Catholics, and not yet, but soon you will see that they will be Christianized by who? The Russians and the Ukrainians?
The Byzantine.
By the Constantinople one. So let's go. I mean, the Christianization of Poland is already 960 something. The Christianization of Russians officially is like 989, I think. But anyway, until the year, let's say 1000 to make it more round, you have already, they are more affiliated with this kind of Christianity, and Hungarians and Polish, Hungarians are not Slavic. Anyway, they also newcomers in the region. They came through the east, but we shouldn't. I mean, it's too much to talk about everybody. So now you roughly see the division in the north, Western Slavs and Eastern Slavs, but still you have the Rus. Okay. And you have here Poland. And this is still one thing. You can't talk about Ukrainians and Belarusians and Russians. This is the Eastern Slavs. And if you go forward, fast forward, okay, you see some divisions, you have two kind of states, but still they are the Eastern Slavs. These are still the descendants of this Rus, the Kievan Rus. And if you go, okay, if you move forward, now it looks more clear. Okay, let's stop here now. Let's stop to this, like this. Oh no, leave it. Okay, what's happened now, roughly now?
Mongol Empire.
Okay, the Mongols invade. This is a very key part in the history of the Eastern Slavs. Woohoo. Because the Mongols invade them. The Mongols came from the east.
Who are the Mongols?
It's the same story like I told before, the same story. Like people from the nomadic people from the east moving towards the west. Okay, shall we go to the linguistic thing to see what's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a part of Ukraine. This is Western Ukraine, this is Eastern Ukraine. So you already see in southeastern Ukraine, there are no Slavic people. They are like this Kypchak. These Kypchak are like Turkic speaking. They are the same kind of people that they came from.
Mongols.
No, Turkic people. Mongols are related to the Turkic people, but they are linguistically a bit different. But they are relatives anyway. These Kypchak, the Kumans, as they're more known, they are Turkic people. So this is Ukraine, but no Slavic people living here now anyway. But still, okay, you have these Eastern Slavs that they are wrongly called Russian here. you know what's interesting? When you say that, it reminds me a bit this, this biological thing. When they say like two species, actually languages are very similar. The evolution of languages is similar with the evolution of the species, of the biological species. And actually, Darwin himself mentioned it. When Darwin discovered the evolution, the theory of evolution, said that the evolution of the species, of the animals, and I mean the biological organisms, it's similar with the evolution of languages. And this is the beginning of this, what we call cultural evolution. So when we talk about human origin, we wrongly say that humans are the descendants of apes, and the chimps are our ancestors, which is not true. And here is a similar mistake, because languages, like species, contemporary species, like contemporary languages, they have common ancestors. They are cousins. So you can't say, for example, Ukrainian, it's a form of Russian. It's anachronistic, it's retrospective.
Interesting.
It's like you say today humans are a kind of chimps. No, humans and chimps, they have a common ancestor, which maybe is more close to the chimp, but it can be more close to human. We don't know. So it's interesting. Anyway, it's interesting to see that even classification of language is similar. You have families of languages, you have subfamilies, like in biology. You have order, suborder, and species and families of species. So it's interesting. And it's also interesting if you want to divide the unit of do I go very far now?
No.
Anyway, okay. The unit of biology is the species. The rest is more like classification for it's more artificial. But
so basically you're saying that we cannot call Ukraine the same thing with it's different
you
things.
shouldn't say that Ukraine is a kind of Russian. You can say that Russia and Ukraine, they have a common ancestor. That's why we shouldn't call it Russian.
It's not a bit Russia, and it's like different thing. Even if they have a lot of similarities, it's a different thing.
You can't say that the mother is Russia and the child is Ukrainian. Outside the same family came two children. Today is Russian, and today is Ukrainian, and today is Belarusian.
Interesting.
So it's like the common ancestor thing. So the unit of biology and evolution is the species. Everything else, family, order, and all this kind of divisions of classification, they are constructs. But the species is a real thing, because what defines a species, it's natural. You are the same species if you can make children with another member of the species. If you cannot have a reproduction, then you are not the same species. So biology puts a limit.
But what's the translation in the Ukraine?
Wait. I told you can edit this out, but I care about your education and your intellectual growth. So I found this opportunity to mention it. So if the unit is the species, the natural unit, in the case of language, is when the genes of a member of an organism can mutual understand each other, they can communicate, they can produce a new member of this species. When there is communication. When there is no communication, if for example a human make love with a dog, there's no communication. The genes cannot talk to each other. It reminds language a little bit. So they cannot produce a new member. It's a kind of similar with languages. So the unit of the language is like the family. When you have intelligibility, then you have one species. So in the picture I showed you today, with the families of language, you see in Europe 3 big families. Between them there is intelligibility. It's like there are 3 species, and the rest are like subspecies. So you have the Slavic languages and you have subspecies. Among subspecies in biology, you have communication, because a subspecies can have children. A dog with a wolf can make children, or even a horse with a donkey. So linguistics and evolutionary biology, they have many common things. Anyway, I went a bit far. I don't know if anybody understood my thoughts.
No, I did.
But Darwin himself pointed out languages are kind of similar with my theory. And
so if a language can communicate with the other language,
you can call it a species.
It's one species.
It's a group. So Slavic languages.
So what does that has to do?
I
exactly with what we're doing.
No, I wanted to mention that this is not right. It's not right to say that the ancestors of humans are chimps.
So because they call
them Russian is similar.
Belarusians and is Ukrainian and Russian.
It's a similar mistake.
Okay.
Or if you say the ancestors of the whale, it's a hippopotamus, because it's the closest relative today. You can't say they were hippopotamus and they became whales. They are cousins. The common ancestor is something that looks not like hippopotamus, not like whale. The same is like our common ancestor. So
that kind of supports that they're different thing in a way.
Yes, Ukrainian is not a child.
Cousins.
It's a cousin of Russia. Ukrainian, Belarusian, they should be called cousin. That's why this name shouldn't be used.
Wow, cool.
Anyway, but commonly people call the language of the Rus Russian. Anyway, but so we move. Let's go to political map now. The Mongols invade the land of Rus. So now all the Rus.
Mongols are huge.
There were many, and Genghis Khan, Genghis Khan.
No.
It's the greatest warrior of history.
The warrior of history.
Yeah, he was the leader of this group. And he was like fire. They were like nomads, very capable of using the bow and arrow, living on the horses.
Genghis Khan.
Yeah.
Oh.
They were living on the horses. Nothing could stop them. That's why when we look, come on. If you see the history now, immediately we see them. Look how fast they're coming. Like, if you go you have the Rus, very nice, settled country, and then you see, look how they're coming. In history. Immediately,
it's crazy.
Because
and this is what Elon Musk was saying. If you have technological advancement over the other people, if you have horses.
And bow and arrow.
And the other people don't have horses.
And the ability to use bow and arrow while on the horse. They were incredible. All these nomad people from the steppe of the east coming towards the west.
Wow.
They had the technology of using the bow and arrow while moving. They were masters, and this was one of their secrets. Anyway, so now the land of Rus is
no, it's not anyway. This is incredible. Anyway,
no, the land of Rus now is under the Mongols, and the Mongols were together with another tribe. The Mongols are Mongol speaking, let's say, but their army was comprised mostly by Turkic speaking people, what we call Tatars. So until this moment, Mongols and Tatars is like one thing. Like the Mongols were like the rulers. Beautiful. And the Tatars were like the people more. The Tatars speaking a Turkic language. Until today, Tatars speak Turkic language. Language which is intelligible with Turkish, with Uzbek, with Kazakh. Anyway, so they are occupied. And they are under the rule of a foreign empire. All of them. So you still cannot talk about distinct Ukrainians and Belarusians and Russians. They are all Rus, Eastern Slavs under the dominion of the the Mongols and the Tatars. So it's roughly the same picture, if you can see, roughly. Okay, you see some, after the year 1300, these Tatar and Mongols, they started to weaken. So
they lasted how many years? 100?
So you see, there's different color. These Slavs here, Kiev, and so you see different formations in the same color. So under the Mongols, they were not exactly under the Mongols, and that's it. I mean, they had already some formation. They were like vassals. They were like inside the Mongol Empire, but you see now some states here, part of the Mongol Empire, but Slavic people that they were like in the kind of autonomous, but all of them obeyed to the Mongols. And here, this is where it's purely Mongol. So these are the nomadic Mongol and Tatar people. And here are the Slavic people, the Eastern Slavs, under the Mongols. So you can see already the difference. So, okay, after this year, you see difference in the name. You see the name Golden Horde. So already you don't talk about the Mongol Empire. You talk about this part of the Mongol, which was more directly them, and it's called Golden Horde. It's another name. You will see this name long in this history. And then you have these semi-autonomous Slavic states that they obey they pay tribute and taxes to the Mongols. Okay, and this is slowly, this is the picture. I mean, Ukraine, don't forget, Ukraine is here. So the whole of Ukraine is this picture. Southern Ukraine, directly Mongols and Tatars. Northern Ukraine, Slavic people who are obeying to the Tatars. And now, if you're moving in time, slowly, you see some of them, of these Slavs, they don't have this color anymore. So they are like freeing themselves from the Mongols. Okay, but until now, don't forget, this is Ukraine here now. So the same thing, roughly the same thing. Ukraine is the same. You see, already we see a state here. Lithuania becoming bigger. If you go back, you see Lithuania, which is a small country up here, it start expanding somehow. Is important for our history now, our story. So Lithuania is expanding. So you see, now it reaches kind of the border of, you see Kiev now. This is the Principality of Kiev. You see, it reaches the border, roughly here is the border of Ukraine. So already now, middle of the 14th century, and Lithuania is already expanded. There was a historical battle, I don't know so well, between the Mongols and the Blue Waters battle, something like that. Anyway, Lithuania defeated the Mongols, and they expanded in the land of the Western Slavs, of the Eastern Slavs. So this is already a part of
Kiev and stuff.
It's a part of, this is part of, I mean, Ukraine is roughly like this. And a part of Ukraine is Poland. So if you go back, you see, after the middle of the 14th century, something changed. It's not just Eastern Slavs in the land of Ukraine, just Eastern Slavs and Turkic people in the south. Eastern Slavs obeying to the Mongols, and Turkic people in the south obeying to the Mongols. This is what we call Tatars. But you see Poland and Lithuania. So after the middle of the 14th century, you see in the lands of today, Ukraine, a part is Poland, Western Slavic, Catholic country, and Lithuania. Lithuania, interestingly enough, Lithuanians is the last ethnic group of Europe becoming Christians. So this was roughly the time they became Christians. Until the middle of the 14th century, weirdly enough, they resisted Christianization, and they still, roughly in this moment, I mean, at this moment, I guess, I forgot when is the Christianization of Lithuania, but roughly the middle of the 14th century, until this moment, they have a settled civilization, but it's not Christian, it's pagan. So they persisted the Christianization until this moment. And when they started this southwards expansion, roughly this time, I don't remember when, but roughly this middle of the 14th century time, they became Christians themselves. What kind of Christians? Eastern or Western, you think? Today Lithuanians are? If you don't know.
Orthodox.
They are not Orthodox.
No?
No, they're Catholics until today. So Lithuanians, when they became Christianized,
from Roman Empire.
the Catholics, okay, after the 11th century, you can clearly call them Orthodox and Catholics. It's no problem, because the churches divided in the 11th century. So they were Christianized roughly in this moment when they started their expansion. They already had an organized, like Europeanish kind of state, but without Christianity. It's kind of peculiar. So these are the last pagans. So they started their expansion. So now you see the history of Ukraine started looking differently. After the middle of the century, you see Lithuania and Poland expanded, and now you see this is Ukraine. Now here is Ukraine. So you see Poland and Lithuania are already in the land of today's Ukraine, and this is a very crucial part of the history. You have after the middle.
Why is very crucial?
After the middle of the 13th century, already you can see that. I told you there is this part not associated with the West, this part starting to have association with the West.
So this is kind of the first time that we see.
This is the beginning. This is the time you can say that there is a division among the Eastern Slavs. You can't talk before the middle of the 14th century. You cannot really talk about separate Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians. This is the beginning of their division, and it's political. And the political division will also bring linguistic division, and the linguistic division, together with the political, will bring also cultural division. So now you can this division started, roughly. Before the middle of the 14th century, the Eastern Slavs are Eastern Slavs. So I hope I don't offend anybody I'm probably wrong, but this is the history I know. So if any Ukrainian believed that they were like distinct from Russians before the middle of the 14th century, it's probably my mistake. Anyway, this is what I know about history. Anyway,
so basically until the 14th century, there is no Ukraine. You
can't really talk about
Ukraine.
No.
Don't
put them in different category. There's no Ukrainians, not Russians, not Belarusians. They are all. I mean, don't forget that they are cousins. The Russians are not the parents, and Belarusians and Ukrainians are the children. They are equal. I mean, it's like the species. I tell you, they have a common ancestor, and this common ancestor you can call him the Rus, or you can call him the Eastern Slavs. But it's not historically true to say Russians are the ancestors and descendants are the Ukrainians. I mean, that's how I see it. Maybe I offend the Russians now, or maybe I offend the Ukrainians. I don't know. So at least if my answers are wrong, at least I think I put the right questions. So at least somebody have to wonder, this guy is right or wrong. So I may be wrong because I'm not a historian. I just try to explain you. I mean, okay, I knew these things, and I always explain you what Elon Musk said. I mean, many years now. I mean, when Phidias found out that he don't understand something that Elon Musk said, he's in panic. So he always, I mean, I receive an email, teacher, help me. This word that Elon said, I don't understand. Please help me. So he asked me again. I mean, usually he asks me about things I'm more familiar, like physics and the information theory. I mean,
What do you mean? You are
Anyway,
it doesn't get more familiar than this.
no, of course, physics is more familiar. Okay, I know the history of this place because I was dealing with Moldova. In the southern of Moldova, I was very much into. I was living there. I was involved with the history of the people living in the south of Moldova, and it's because it's kind of similar region. That's why I know. And I a bit studied, a little bit remembered what I knew when you asked me about this alert. Elon said something that I don't understand it. But still, I declare again, I might be wrong, but I think I put the right questions.
So here
Anyway.
in 14th century, we have Lithuania,
And Poland expanding in
and
the land.
these have the what language? These are Catholics. These are Catholics
Yeah,
now.
Lithuanians, if you remember the picture I saw you, they speak a Baltic language which is very, very different than Slavic. It's kind of related, not so different than the other European language, but it's still different species. That's why I told you. If you want to have a look, you can. So these are the Slavic languages. These are the Baltic languages, and Lithuanian is here. So this is already a different species. You don't have communication with the genes. I like this. The genes of this species and the genes of this species cannot have a child, cannot make sex, cannot communicate.
They can make sex, but they cannot make a child.
Okay, they can try to communicate, but a Baltic speaker and a Slavic speaker can talk to each other and they can look to each other like this and don't understand. They can understand each other somehow. Depends how close they are. They can understand somehow. Depends how close they can understand. But among the species, you can't have.
Go back.
So the Poles are here. So the Poles are here actually. So they understand them. They are relatives. They are fellow Slavs. Lithuanians are not. But both of them, Poles and Lithuanians, are both Catholics and both West. And this is the important thing now.
So here it starts kind of they are obviously different.
They have a political difference. Some of these
and some of religious difference.
Actually not, because although the Ukrainian, I mean the western part of the Eastern Slavs were living for centuries under Catholic rule, Lithuanian and Polish, and after, as you will see, Austrian too, they remain Orthodox. So they remain Orthodox, but they were under strong influence, linguistic, especially from the Poles, not from the Lithuanians, obviously, because they cannot reproduce. I like this very much. Yeah, now I realize that it's so obvious, this biology and linguistic thing. Anyway, so Lithuanians cannot really influence them linguistically, but Poles can. So Ukrainian language, being an Eastern Slavic language, had been evolved under the influence of Polish or Lithuanian. What do you think? Lithuanian cannot reproduce. Polish. So even if some of them were living under Lithuanians, some of them living under Poles, you will see it will change all the time. And some of them under Austrians. Austrians speak a Germanic language, Lithuanians speak a Baltic language, but Poles speak a Slavic language. They could influence them linguistically. But nobody could persuade them to become Catholics. Actually, a part of them became a kind of Catholics when they were living under the Austrians and these Western countries, these Western powers. It's a kind of Jesus, too many details. It's a kind of orthodoxy. It's called Greek Catholicism or Unia Church.
And then he's saying that I'm not very familiar with this.
I was living there. I knew I'd been to their church. I mean, I know them. I mean, I was living that part.
It's very important for you to get a perspective to live there and to understand and to smell everything.
To smell and to feel.
You cannot like just study Ukraine and like just.
How can you forget if you are an Orthodox and you go to a church that looks like Orthodox everything? I mean, the priests have beard. The icons are like Byzantine. They sing like Byzantine, but when the time comes, they commemorate no patriarch, they commemorate the Pope of Rome. It's shocking. I mean, how can an Orthodox-looking church, I mean, everything is like Byzantine, everything, icons and the iconography and the priest with beard and everything is like, not like Catholic priest, but they commemorate the Pope. And this is the Greek Catholics. I mean, some of the, okay, this is another story. It's very important for the history of Ukraine, very, very important. Okay, but we could omit it to be more, to be more general. But anyway, a part of them remain Orthodox, but this was a kind of policy of the Catholic Church. They would accept churches, especially when they were under Catholic rule, to remain exactly as they are, to keep all their typikon, all their how you say this in English, all their rituals and their cultural stuff of the religion intact, even they cross themselves in the right way or wrong way. I mean, starting from the like us and not like Catholics, from the east side to west, from left side to right or right to east. They would accept them even in the symbol of faith, to mention the filioque. Anyway, okay, I'm going too far. Anyway, to be exactly like Orthodox, but just to declare that they're part of the Catholic Church, and they call Greek Catholics. And until now, a big portion of Ukraine are Greek Catholics, and it's because they were, of course, where do you expect them to be, in the eastern part or the western part? Western part. Until now, a big part, maybe like up to 10% of the country are Greek Catholics.
Shit, that's interesting.
And you have them also in Romania, and you have them also in Hungary, and Romania also is very many.
Okay.
And you still have some of them in the Arab lands too. I mean, but okay, too much.
Let's move on with the.
I forgot. Yeah, okay. So this is the breakthrough in the history, that you start having Eastern Slavs, Rus Slavs living under Western powers, and Polish being a Slavic too, influencing linguistically. So if you move it like this, you see it's getting strong. I mean, Lithuania expanded more. This is clearly.
This is exactly the devotion that has on the elections that you showed.
Not I mean,
it's kind of
starting looking like that. Yeah, but it's early to mention it like this. But the interesting thing is that, okay, here you have Poland, Lithuania, here you have the Western Ukraine, Lithuania expanded now, but here you don't have Slavic people. Here you have Tatars and Mongols. Golden Horde is Tatar. Okay, there must be some Slavic people living under the direct rule of the Tatars and Mongols here, but officially you don't see them in the records. So the part of Ukraine that is supposed to be more close to Russia-ish kind of identity, for many centuries, you will see that it was a part of not a Russian kind of state, but a Turkic Mongol state, with some Slavs living here. And this is my beloved part of, I can't wait to mention it, because this is my beloved part of Ukrainian history. I'm in love with this part of Ukrainian history. I mean, there were some people, anyway, like Slavic people, they call Cossacks. I mean, it's too early to talk about the Cossacks. It's one of my favorite states in history, because people, after it will be more obvious, these lands here are actually, okay, it's called the color of Golden Horde, which is a Mongol Tatar thing, but these places here in history, this area here, roughly, this Podolia and the eastern part, I forgot how it's called. In history, they are known as the wild fields. And here, you actually don't really have a rule. So people here were fleeing especially from Orthodox people, that they didn't really like to have Catholic rulers, lords, but also some people from Rus, I guess, that they didn't want to have, I mean, social oppression. Okay, you have Catholics, but anyway, it's a state, so oppressed people. I mean, medieval state too. So people that they feel they wanted to be free, they wanted to be self-governed. That's why I like them for political reasons. They start slowly living here in this part of southern Ukraine, not very much close to the coast, but a bit further around this lower part of the Dnieper River. And here is like what started to be the Cossacks. So you already have people living here, Slavic people, but you don't see them in history. And these are the people, I mean, this wonderful, very interesting kind of formations that they were autonomous, that they want to live under nobody, and they form like semi-autonomous, independent kind of societies, and this is the beginning of the Cossacks. Anyway, so it's misleading to say there are no Slavs here in the places where you see a Turkic Mongol rule. But anyway, so, but you're right, the division, for whatever reason, is still start to be like, kind of look like something. Okay, so if you see, it's kind of similar. Okay, now they call it Lithuania, and it got a color. I don't know, I mean, the fashion of this map, I don't know when they give color to a state. I mean, Novgorod is like, without color, even, I don't understand these people. Why? Okay, Lithuania, they get color when they become a real organized kind of Western kind of country. So you see, Poland, Lithuania, okay, the Ukrainian lands divided, Turkic rule, I mean, Golden Horde, Tatar rule, and Catholic rule, Polish and Lithuania. And this goes on and on. You see, the same thing, Lithuania, after the 1400, Lithuania now is almost all of Ukraine. After the beginning of the 15th century, all of Ukraine is under Lithuanian and Polish rule. Only this part in the south remain under this Mongol.
Where is Donetsk and Luhansk?
Somewhere here. I guess Mariupol must be here. Kind of here. Anyway, Crimea is, I mean, famously under the Tatars. It will remain until this Elon 1783 under the Tatars, anyway, as you will see afterwards. So it's already start becoming obvious. Let's move. Are we in a hurry, or is it okay?
No, we're good.
My poor people who are not interested in this. So we are still this picture for like for a century almost. We have this picture. Western part different than eastern part. I mean, and now it's almost all Ukraine for more than half a century, some parts more than a century, under a non-Rus rule.
Yeah.
Now,
but Lithuania is like completely different. It's not Catholic. Is it Catholic?
It is Catholic, yeah.
Catholic.
So you have Orthodox.
But linguistically, it's completely
different. But
thing.
Polish is not. Poles influence them. But you have Orthodox people now here speaking an Eastern Slavic language, but they are under the rule of Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
But living in a different state. So already you can see a proto-division. So here you have the Belarusians, not to forget them, and here you have the Ukrainians. Then it's history. And here you have like Russians now, roughly, Russia. Anyway, so this is the picture. So you see the picture going on and on and on. Now we reach the end of the 15th century.
Muscovy.
So if you see in the south, okay, Muscovy. So after you see on this map the name Muscovy, this Muscovy is still under the Tatars now here. See, that's why this color, under the Mongol, Tatar, Mongol, whatever you call them. But this is a kind of the ancestor of the today's Russians. So the today Russia is this state. I mean, it's the continuation of this state.
Interesting.
So you see them change the color, becoming now free from the Mongols. And you see here a different formation, the Crimean Khanate. This will stay until Elon's 1783. This state here, the Tatar state of the southern part. So this is the beginning of Russia of today. These are the kind of western part of the Eastern Slavs, Belarusians, and kind of ancestors of the Ukrainians. Anyway, so if you until the year 1500, you see roughly this picture, but Moscow state, this ancestor of Russians, are moving now to the east. So already they have a part of Ukraine. So these people here, these Eastern Slavs, from now on, they will live under Russian rule, proto-Russian, kind of Moscow rule, people here. So you already see a division in the country, like Western Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, a part of it living under Russians, which is closer to what's happening now. They are more kind of feeling more close to Russia. But who lives here is like under a Tatar rule, kind of Crimean Khanate. But already you see that Lithuania started becoming smaller and more a part of Ukraine after living for a century or 1.5 century, start becoming part of
Moscow,
this ancestor of the today's Russian state. Shall we take a look in the linguistic thing? This Russian is what's supposed to be the Eastern Slavs, having the similar. So you see all these changes here. I mean, we are now approaching this. If you say that the first, when was it? Remember when was the really first time that the Eastern Slavs were divided? When the Lithuanians started and the Polish started to invade their land. So it's middle of the 14th century. Okay. So now is the time that here you start having Poland, here Polish and Lithuanian, but still the language should be like Eastern Slav under this false whatever name Russian. Okay, 1400 the Lithuanian is taking more territory, but still no Lithuanian language, because I mean people are still speaking an Eastern Slavic language. So after the year 1450, something interesting here appears, a new word. So these guys who make this map, they consider that after the year 1500, the Eastern Slavic languages are divided. They are divided between Russian, according to them, and Ruthenian. So
it's not very simple, huh? There is a lot of
yeah, but these are names. So Ruthenian, when we say Ruthenian, means the kind of ancestral language to where is Belarusians and where is Ukrainians? You think Belarusians are here or here? Russian or Ruthenian?
What do you mean?
Anyway, Belarusia is here roughly. So when we say Ruthenian, we mean the proto-Ukrainian and Belarusian. It's the common ancestors of Belarusian. So because of the political division and the influence of Polish language and the different political situation, already from 1500s, you can talk about two distinct languages. After 1.5 century living under a different rule and under the influence of Polish, you already can talk about two different linguistic groups. The Ruthenian, which is Proto-Ukrainian and Belarusian, still not distinct, and Russian, let's say. So if you see this, where is this picture I showed you before? Where is the picture of the languages? Where it is?
Yes, here.
So if you see this, look, Ukrainian, Belarusian, so close to each other, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is what after the 1500, this is, you can't distinguish between them in the year 1500 because they're so close to each other. But you already can distinguish them, the Ruthenian so-called thing, from Russian. So the division will come later because the closest the language is to another language today, linguistically, historically, it used to be one thing closer to time. So you would expect them to divide earlier than, Russian from Ukrainian to divide earlier than Belarusian from Ukraine, because you see the distance here. Yes. It's obvious, isn't it? So you have I didn't even know that I know all this. Anyway, so now you still start have this, you see Russian is expanding now to, these people here are non-Russian people, the Komi, these Mansi, Khanti, they still exist, these people, Mari, they are non-Russian, non-Slavic people, mostly they speak language that they are, some of them are Turkic, most of them are like more affiliated to today's Finnish and Hungarian for some reason. And the expansion of Russia is taking place in the east now. They will go, now this is what we call Siberia roughly here at the beginning. And Russians are expanding now towards their lands. These people are still exist now. They are subordinate. They are part of Russia, but they still exist. They speak languages. They have distinct, even physical features. But this is not interesting very much for us. Russia is expanding to this part, but let's go back because we are already today almost. So let's stop to the year 1500 when we stopped year 1500. Let's go to the political map. Do you agree? Why not? So this is roughly the picture. So now already
similar maps now.
The more you come close together, the more to today, the more they will look kind of similarish, kind of. So you see, now Lithuania started to lose ground, and Moscow, like Proto-Russia, are gaining ground in the Ukrainian lands. So you see, the more you move to town, the more you see them.
Now it became Russia, not Moscow.
Okay, now it became Russia. Is historical reason is because now they declared, like now is the beginning of the Tsardom of Russia. Now a Russian ruler declared himself, I'm the Tsar. Okay, this has to do also with the history of the Orthodox people in general. This is like 100 years after there's no Byzantine Empire here, isn't it?
No.
Like now they are the Ottomans after the middle of the 15th century. So after the fall of After the fall of Constantinople, which was the leading Orthodox country, you have no Orthodox state now in the south, but you have one, which in the north, Moscow. So these Russians, the Muscovites, they waited 100 years after the fall of Constantinople in 1453 to declare that because Orthodox people, this is how Orthodoxy works historically, the empire of Constantinople is kind of spiritual, also kind of leader of the Orthodox. So the Muscovites, they wouldn't say we have an empire, a Tsar, kind of, because the empire is in Constantinople. But after there were no political Orthodox authority, after the 1453, the only political authority in Orthodox world, it was the leader of Moscow, of this proto-Russia. So they waited for a century to understand, I mean, to accept that, okay, no Orthodox ruler will be anymore in Constantinople, and we are the third Rome. We are the second Constantinople. So from the moment that Moscow became Russia, the Tsardom of Russia, it symbolized a kind of that the Russians understood that, so like roughly middle of the 16th century, is like the Russians understood that now we are the leaders of Orthodoxy politically. And so it's very important for history in general. So before the center of Orthodoxy was here. Now, already 100 years, we don't have a political / spiritual leader, because the emperor is 100 years gone. So when you see
which was Constantine,
the last one, Constantine, whatever kind of, yeah. Many Constantines in the Byzantine history. So that's why you see the change. When you see the change from Moscow to Russia, means that the Russians understood that we are starting to become the leader of Orthodox world. And this is the beginning also of the doctrine. Okay, it's a bit before the doctrine of the third Rome. Like first Rome is this Rome, second Rome is Constantinople. After the fall of Constantinople in 1453, we took the Orthodox world under our leadership, the Russians, kind of. So that's the change of the name the guys here use. So you see the time passes and the Russian is expanding more in the expense of the Ukrainian land, but still you have Lithuania and Poland more. So already a part of Ukraine is already a part of Russia, let's say. But people of this part already had the experience of a century at least living under the...
And they are Christians.
All the people, these Slavs living here, called Ruthenians according to the other map, they remain Orthodox. A part of this small part that they became this Greek Catholic thing. They are Orthodox living under Catholics. So now you see a change in the name. We don't have Poland anymore. After the middle of the 6th century, you have Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Poland and Lithuania became one. They agreed to form a Commonwealth. So you see them as a single country. So you have Poles living here, you have Lithuanians living here, you have Eastern Slavs living here, but under the same rule, Pole-Lithuanian rule, Catholic rule anyway.
Did they have maps back then?
Not that accurate, because they had no satellites. So if you see map of that time, it resembled those maps, but they are kind of funny. Because, I mean, they couldn't see from far away what's going on. I mean, but the more you go towards time, the more efficient they became. And if you go like 19th century, still no satellites beginning, but still you see maps that they are quite okayish, kind of. Why are you asking me this question?
I don't know.
They couldn't visualize all these things. That's anyway. The historians of that time had a more hard time to express themselves. Anyway, so why are we waiting like that? Interesting. You see so you see eastern part, Russianish kind of, western part under this Catholic rule, different ones, more close to the west because they're Catholics. And here you still see the rule of non-Russians, not Polish-Lithuanians, but these Tatars. Tatars are Muslims, they speak Turkish, they're totally different. And the invisible, my beloved Cossacks somewhere here, already started existing. people that they were free-spirited. Okay, I romanticize them a little bit, but I like them so much. Okay, free-spirited people, they didn't like to live under the oppression of a king. They came in these sparsely inhabited lands and they start forming communities. You don't see them on the map. In the map, you see Catholic rule, Muslim rule, and Orthodox rule. Anyway, I think they will never show them this map. I mean, okay, is not very much mentioned in the international map. There was an interesting big state, semi-autonomous, in a part of history became totally autonomous, like hegemony. It's called the Kazakhs. They were living here. They had the distinct Slavic Orthodox culture influenced by the Tatars. That's why the Cossacks until today, they are very much associated with the horse. They are very good in horses. I mean, they're very good warriors, fighters on horses, because they got influenced by their neighbors. They were living in the lands that they were controlled by nobody. And it's very important for the Ukrainian history, but I think you will not see them. You don't often see them on the map. So already there must have been another state here, kind of state, of these people, free-minded people that they wanted to live like separate from organized states, especially those, because the Cossacks of here, they are Orthodox. So they are fleeing, especially this Catholic rule, but I guess also this rule, because oppression can be also from your fellows, because social oppression is maybe worse than religious oppression or ethnic oppression. Anyway, so there's something invisible here, the beginning of the Cossack state. I think it will not show it, never on the map. Turkic rule, Cossacks, Catholic rule, you see it changes roughly. So middle of the 17th century, you start up, you see the Russians war with Polish-Lithuania, occupy almost all of Ukraine now. Polish-Lithuania small. It was a kind of battle. I don't remember what happened here. And so Russia is expanding. So okay, starting from the 1500s, you see less and less part of today's Ukrainian is living under the Lithuanian and Polish influence. The more the time passes, bigger and bigger parts are living under the Russians. And the Tatars are still here in the south. With the Tatars and maybe these Cossacks already exist somewhere here in between the two. But anyway, but this will not stay like this. Okay, so was a war, some war. We will find it, we will put it, I guess, afterwards. They fought, the Russians advanced. There was a treaty kind of, so they went back. So Ukraine's again divided, middle of the 17th century, Eastern Ukraine under Russia, under the Catholic Poles, influenced by the Poles linguistically, culturally, under the West, Muslims, Turks. And already now here it's an invisible state, the Cossacks. Okay. The Cossacks, I told you, they are Eastern Slavs. They're living here in today's Ukraine, ancestors of today's Ukrainians somehow, but Orthodox. So if you move kind of the same picture roughly, so we're approaching which date here?
The date of Elon Musk.
You can't forget it. When Elon said it's like a dogma. Okay, so Crimea is still under this Muslim Tatar Turkish speaking. Nothing Russian here, nothing resembling Russian. Here are the Cossack, whatever, Lithuanian, Russians. Ukraine is divided between these two powers. We're reaching the year 1800, end of the 18th century. And you see, okay, again, a war. Russia is crushing the Lithuanians. after roughly this time, most part of Ukraine will be under the Russians. Roughly end of the 18th century, after these developments. So when is the year of Elon? Let's see, when is the year of Elon?
1783.
Okay, let's approach it. Let's just look up something change here. What change?
Crimea.
Crimean Khanate got the same color with Russia but different. Okay, this is the time now of the Russian-Turkish wars and Russian-Polish wars.
Because it was the Ottoman Empire down.
If you go even back in time, you see
You can turn
the Ottomans.
Do things differently.
The Ottomans already control this part of southern Ukraine. The Crimeans, long before, after this moment, you see now they have the color of the Golden Horde. Now they have no color, and now they have a similar color with the Ottomans. I guess in the logic of this map, when you have similar colors, you have similar political affiliation. So after roughly this moment, the Tatars, being Muslim and Turkic speaking, very closely related to the Ottomans, they became vassals of the Ottomans. So they accepted the Ottomans. And even a small part of Ukraine, you see the southern of Ukraine, is just Ottoman. So the Ottomans, after the middle of the 15th century, expanded to these lands, to Crimea and the lands around Crimea. Okay? And now you have indirectly Ottoman control, directly. This is oh my God. This is a beylik, how it's called. It's like a region of the Ottomans. This is directly Ottoman Empire. So South Crimea, Ottoman Empire, like direct rule, and here is like Tatars that obey to the Sultan of Istanbul.
Interest.
So as you approach, you see similar picture in Crimea, because now we're focusing on Crimea. So as you approach the Elon's date, 1783, you see that until now is still the same picture. Ottomans, the whole South Ukraine. You see the whole South Ukraine after, like, when is it? I mean, after the end of roughly the end of the 15th century, the beginning of the 16th century, the south part of Ukraine is already not Polish-Lithuanian, not Russian, but Turkic Muslim. Okay? It doesn't mean that here the place is full of Turks, living Turks, and here full of Tatars. I mean, I told you here Slavic people were living, the ancestors of the Cossacks, these free-spirited people I told before. But it looks like here is like the rule of Muslim Turkic speaking Ottomans, roughly. So after this year, you have three kind of powers in Ukraine: the Russian part, the Polish-Lithuanian part, and the Turkish Muslim kind of part, Orthodox, Catholics, Muslims. So let's see what happened in the year of Elon. So this is roughly the period of wars of Russian Empire. You see that wars, yeah. You see that the name changed in Russia when it changed. It's called now Russian Empire. So after this beginning of the 18th century, Russia is not anymore a tsardom. The Russian ruler is not a tsar. He started call themselves empire. I think this is the time of Peter the Great, the tsar who first, I'm not sure anyway, but I think Peter the Great. So before it was Ivan the Terrible, who said, I'm not anymore a prince. There's no Byzantine rule. This is what happened in the middle of the 16th century. I'm not anymore a prince. There's no Byzantine empire. my Orthodox ruler, so I can call myself, I'm the Tsar. So middle of the 6th century, the Russians call themselves Tsardom, and the ruler called itself Tsar. Tsar is, you know, the Tsar is the same name like emperor. For the Romans, even in the old Roman times, but also for the Byzantines. So naming themselves Tsar means that now we are the rulers of the Orthodox world. So now another move, beginning of the 18th century. You need battery?
Yeah, we can do another 10 minutes.
I think we will need more. In the pace we go. Anyway, okay, the Russians, by naming themselves empire, I think it's Peter the First, they identify themselves like an empire. Empire is more Western name. Tsar is like more Eastern Orthodox name. So after this moment, the Russians believe that they are one of the Western powers, of the European powers. After the name emperor appears here, the Russians have the feeling that we are one of the Europeans. Peter the Great, the Russian Tsar who became emperor, I guess, he was very much impressed by the West. And he wanted to convert Russia into a Western power. So we roughly reached the middle of the 18th century. And this is those years. I mean, the 18th century is the century of the wars of the Russians against the Ottomans and against the Polish-Lithuanians. And it's a period of the expansion of the Russian Empire in the expense of the Ottomans and the Crimean Tatars and the Polish-Lithuanians. So let's go to the linguistic map just to see, update what's going on until the middle of the 18th century. So we see this Ruthenian thing. It's interesting to see when those guys will put the Ruthenians divided into Belarusians and Ukrainians, isn't it? So you see, Ruthenian language is still...
So far, no Ukrainians showed on maps.
Ukrainian is still here. How can it be not? But you can't really talk according to them. You can't really talk about a distinct Belarusian and Ukrainian language because they're so close. So you can't divide them. It's like one linguist, like one species. They can still reproduce, kind of mutually understand each other. Interesting to see when they will put... Oh, so they put them very, very late. You see, in the... Like... So according to these guys, it's like middle of the 19th century. According to them, you can't talk about Ukrainians and Belarusian distinct. Okay,
very recent.
It could be. I mean, we shouldn't.
The last 200 years.
Yeah, but that is not necessarily right. This thing, but roughly we see the picture that sometime you can really talk about distinct Ukrainian and Belarusian. But this is the time that Ukrainians already started to want a literary language. They want to write it down. That was the time when they had to decide their alphabet, if it's going to be Latin, if it's going to be... So you can't deny after beginning of the 19th century that you have a Ukrainian language distinct from the Belarusian, because it's the time of the standardization of the language, that they have to write it down. When you write it down, then you can't really talk about just idioms and dialects that they are similar or not. When you write down the language, then it's not anymore like a dialect continuum, as they say in linguistics. It's a language. That's why, at least after the year 1800, you have to talk about a language, because already Ukrainians have their literature. Both Ukrainian, this part, you have the Ukrainians in the... What happened?
The end of the video.
I was going. If you are old, you can. Okay. So you can't deny when you have a written language, you have, it's clear that this is a language. They write their language down. They write in differently than Belarusians and whatever. So in both parts, because Ukraine, don't forget that is still, we will see until the middle of the 9th century is a part, is in Russia with their own intelligentsia, own intellectuals living under the Russians that they desire to have a different language. And also the ones that they were living in the western part, under Polish and Lithuanian, and as we will see after under Austrian rule, that they desire to have their own language. So you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
Both those that live under the Western Catholic rule and those that they are living under the Orthodox rule, both started feeling like intellectually Ukrainians. So that's why they have to declare it even here. I mean, that now you have a distinct Ukrainian language. So
that's the difference.
Because now they write it down. It's different. I mean, they have an alphabet. They write down in both parts, the Russian and the... Anyway, so I think this is no use anymore to use this map because now we see what we want to see.
It's ending.
Now we see the picture. I mean, that's the Western Slavs, Russian, Ukrainian language,
Elon Musk.
Eastern Slav. Elon Musk is political. So we see the three constituent part of the West of the Eastern Slavic languages, main parts. So political now, we are in the middle of the 18th century. Russia is expanding in the Ukrainian lands in the south against the Ottoman and the Tatar allies, and more northwards in the central and western part against the Polish Lithuanians, the Catholics. So if you leave it going on like this, you see, okay, after the year, now let's focus to Crimea now. Hope not.
By the way, our goal with this is to show the facts without bias of opinion. This is what we aspire to do here.
I try not to be influenced because now very hot things are happening. I mean, very and dynamically change things and very, I mean, emotional. And I try to distinct myself of what I feel about what's going on now in Ukraine and just anyway, try to understand what Elon wanted to say. Anyway, so what's happening in Crimea now, before the year 1783 of Elon's, you see until 1758, the 1767, the color is the Ottoman color. So the Tatars here, they're still affiliated to the Ottomans. They still are not a part of the Russian Empire. They have their own state. And after a certain point, okay, after the year 1700 kind of thing, you see another color here. And this color is closer to which color?
To Russia.
So as a result of this Ottoman-Russian wars that they already take place in that time, the Russians now occupy Crimea and they expel the Ottomans and the part of the Tatars. Okay, the Tatars stay, most of them, but after this point, they already are forced to start obeying to the Russians. So Crimea, it start looking more towards like Russia, but still is not the year of Elon. Let's see what happened in the year of Elon. What change do you see? What happened?
It became completely Russian empire.
So when the Russians occupied the Crimean Khanate, they gave
1783.
No, when they occupied them first, when they changed the color, but still was distinct like a yellow, a shade of yellow. You could they occupy them, defeating the Ottomans. They occupied the. Okay, you see, they defeat the Ottomans. Now, after the 1774, I guess, anyway, something like that, after this, now the Russian-Turkish war is going on. Now they occupy them. They defeated the Ottomans, but they gave them autonomy. So the Khan here accepted the Russian authority, but still it's a different state, but under the dominion of the Russians. Like it's a vassal kind of state. But in the year of Elon, now the Russians abolish the Tatar autonomy that they granted them like 10 years ago, and now it's just a part of Russia. So what Elon means is that this land, this Crimea, since 1783, isn't it what the tweet says? It's a part of Russia. This is what he meant. Until, part of which Russia? Different Russia, Russian Empire.
The Soviet Union.
Soviet Union became after, in the 1920s. So, okay, it's not the same Russia, but it's like the ancestor of Russia. So, it's a kind of Russian. Okay? So, what the Russians did, these are the southern Ukrainian lands now. And we still have a part of Ukraine now, towards the end of the 18th century. We have a part of Ukraine that is Russian, a big part, southern Crimea, a part that is small part in the south that is still a part of the Ottomans, and half of it still a part of Polish-Lithuanians. And if you move towards time, you see, the Ottomans, the Russians are expanding. Now all of Ukraine roughly is part of Russia. A part of a very western part is important.
Kiev.
No, Kiev is here. Okay. The very western part. The very western part, it's this color here, it says Galicia here, isn't it? I can't see it. It says Galicia here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, this is a kingdom within this formation. So if we go a bit back, you see, you have the Austrian Empire. Okay, so after this, the Polish-Lithuanians disappear from the history of Ukraine after their defeat by the Ottomans, and after the end of the 18th century, you have wait, Hungary, Poland, Hungary. Let's stop when we see the Austrian thing up here. So anyway, this is now, this color here is the Austrian Empire. After it will change its name as Austro-Hungary, still a very Western country, German speaking, but also Hungarians. This Galicia is like a kingdom of Ukrainians, man. I mean, this is the land of Ukrainians. Of course, it was not just Ukrainians, it was like Poles and Hungarians and others living here. But it's like a kingdom which is a part of Austria. So after this endish kind of the 18th century, the Poland, Lithuania disappear as a political entity from the Ukrainian history, and you have another Western power, the Austrian one, with the Ukrainians still living, the Western Ukraine, but the biggest part of the country, even the south, is now Russia. So you see Austrian Empire. So now you have a small western part living.
But now Moldova is Russian as well.
Okay, don't mix with Moldova. Okay, Russians also occupied Moldova, and they are expanding in the expense of the Ottomans. But this is outside our scope so much now. So this is what's happening now. So you still have these two kinds of Ukraine, Western and Eastern, more close to Russia, more close to the West. And even those parts of Ukraine, there's very south ones, that they were inhabited by the Tatar. By the way, the Tatars, the Cossacks, after the expansion of Russia into their lands, they accepted. I mean, they formed a coalition with the Russians. They became a part of Russia. Eastern Slavs, Christian Orthodox. It was easy for them to agree to come under the Russian rule. of course, they would like to be independent, I guess, but they disappeared. And also the Tatar lands everywhere you see now Russia. So even those places here that they were dispersed, populated, because, you know, the Tatars, they were like nomads. So they didn't really form like villages, settled villages and towns. So those places were like kind of empty-ish. A part of some southern Ukraine, a part of some Tatars that they were like nomads moving here, and the Cossacks that they were living a bit up here. But the Cossacks, even in the Cossacks region, it was like sparsely inhabited. So after this development in the beginning of the 19th century, these empty-ish kind of lands, they were inhabited by settlers. They were settled. So most of the towns that they are existing now in Crimea and southern Ukraine, like Odessa, like Kherson, Mariupol, and all these southern Ukrainian towns, they were not there before the beginning of the 19th century. And they are all constructed from the Russians. So here in the south, you have many people that they are not really from, they are settlers. And they were settlers from many places. Some of them were from the Ukrainian-speaking lands that they seek territory, and I mean, the Russians will give them land. And
so what? Settlers, what they do?
This is the land that they still speak the Russian language, and they, I mean, until 2014. I don't know what happened after 2013. I don't want to comment anyway. But these are the eastern and the southern part that they were more like talking Russian instead of Ukrainian, and more looking for inspiration towards the Russian side. So why is that? Because they are Eastern, more centuries living under the Russian rule instead of the Western rule. And in the south, Tatars left. Okay, Tatars still, until today, they live in Crimea, some of them, but it's not such an important factor anymore. So empty lands that they were like colonized by Russian settlers, more affiliated to the Russians. So that's why you have eastern and southern part more like culturally and linguistically close to Russia, and the western part that is still, you can see this part, Galicia, is still under the Western rule. So the division starts looking like now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of. Even those people here that they are now living under Russia, like central Ukraine, we should mention this Dnieper River, but anyways, you can also talk without mentioning it. But it's very important, that the history. Anyway, even the people here in the western part of this huge river that divides the country, now they are under Russian, but they lived many centuries under the influence of the Poles and other Western, so they already have their identity, even if they live under the Russians. Much more those that they are still, not, since many centuries, still are not in part of Russia. No wonder why in the very west of Ukraine, the people are more stressing their difference from from Russia, than the central Ukrainians. That's why in the western part in Galicia, you have more people that they are more feeling a distinct identity that they are Ukrainians. Because the more you go towards the west, the more you find people that they live more time under
Russian rule.
No, the more you go to the west, the less centuries they spend under Western part. The more you go to the east, the more centuries they spend.
So the more familiar they were with the culture, they wanted to get as closer to the culture.
Kind of feel more close. And in the south, that you have this distinct history of settlers, kind of. With the settlers, they are from many places, some Ukraine, some Russia, some even from the Balkans, many came, Bulgarians and Gagauz and Greeks, Germans. But because they were like a melting pot, they more accumulated the Russianish kind of, the ruling culture. That's why you see this division. But if you keep on going in time, you still see this part under Austria. You see, we already reached the end of the 19th century, and still these people are still have nothing to do with Russians. Distinct identity for many centuries.
So that's why there is a big cultural,
a
a strong differentiation between the west part and the one.
Yeah, you have the western part that they are strictly.
Because they lived so many years under
Yeah,
the
centuries
Austrian
and centuries and centuries. And they form
Hungarian.
their identity being Westerners. That's why they, until today, they want more close because more ties with the West because of the many centuries until now, the year 1970, which is the beginning of the Soviet Union, the revolution. You still see that they still not a part of Russia.
Yeah.
You see, and then you have this part of Ukraine, Kiev and all this around. There are many centuries a part of Russia, but the centuries they live as a part of the Western part was enough to make them having distinct identity. And you go to the south, the settlers more identify with the kind of Russians and this population that there were not that many. And in the more you go to east, the more they feel more familiar with the Russian because they were living more centuries. This is roughly the history of Ukraine, and this is a division roughly. So now this is the year of the end of the Russian Empire. So until the 1920s, let's see how it will go like this. Russian Empire, USSR. So after the year, Russian Empire, people still here live. Okay, USSR and Poland. Now there's no Hungary, no Austria and Hungary here. You have Poland. So after the First World War and the First World War is same time. It ended in the 1918. Yeah. So 1918, end of the war. 1970, the beginning of the civil war in Russia. The civil war created the USSR. So after 1922, 24, now we stopped. Anyway, it's okay. You have this picture. Soviet Union. Within the Soviet Union, you have the Ukrainian SSSR, as I told you, the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic.
And kind of most of Ukraine is in the USSR.
Yeah. As a distinct political entity, as a distinct state, kind of
like United States of America.
Yeah, like a distinct Soviet Socialist Republic. So here you have like kind of Ukraine until here, and here you have like Russia. This, the part of Crimea, but it's a part of what now?
USSR.
But which part of USSR, according to Elon?
Russia.
Yeah. So it was Ukraine, Russia, Crimea. That's why Elon said Khrushchev mistake, because according to this logic, let's go back to where we were. Why we don't stop? Let's go back where we were. Okay. Oh, you see it better now. You see now you see this, the beginning of the Ukrainian state that agreed to. You see, now we are already 2 years of the civil war. Now here is a mess. It's an arrest. I mean, you can't really understand. It's complicated, but you see that a Ukrainian state that was started existing after the
civil war. What is that?
Civil war is a war within Russian Empire, which transformed it into the USSR. So, but it's also things are happening in the West because 1918 is the end of the First World War. So you have changes, radical changes also in the West. So that's why Poland appeared. Before in these Western Ukrainian lands was no Poland, was Austria. So Poland gained ground after the end of the First World War, and that's why they expanded in the land of the Ukrainians. Now you see these two entities, Russia and Ukraine, the communists took over kind of, and they decide to become one after this year 1990. You see this line is not anymore there. So the Ukrainian revolutionists, they decided to join the USSR as a separate entity, kind of. So this is USSR, this is the year 1923 now, roughly this time. You have this picture. A part of Ukraine, the Western Ukraine, living under Poland, Western Catholic still. I mean, so many centuries still not under Russians. And the Ukrainians under the Eastern and Central and whatever Ukrainians, Southern Ukrainians, under the Soviet Union, is not Russia, but still it was very Russianized anyway, still in contact with Russians because in the same country.
So Crimea is kind of not debatable that is closer to Russia. That is
that it should be a part of Russia. What do you mean?
Yeah, it should be a part of Russia.
I don't want to judge this. Elon called it mistake.
Mistake?
Khrushchev mistake.
What do you mean?
According to Elon's tweet, you mean now in 1923 where we are now, or in the year that it became, in the year of Khrushchev, like 1950s when it shifted? So what do you mean? It shouldn't shift. It should stay in Russia.
No, yeah, it shouldn't shift.
Geographically, it makes more sense to be a part of Ukraine. I don't want to judge it because I don't want to judge now.
Oh, it's
what's going on, because I don't want to be biased, and according to Elon, it's the will of the people anyway. But it's tricky. That's why Elon proposed a referendum under the UN, even for those places here, Donetsk, Lugansk, and Zaporozhye and Kherson, where the referendums took place, and Elon proposed to have a more unbiased referendum. So it was a part of Russia, but before it was a part of Tatars. Then why not go giving it back to the Tatars? Because there are no Tatars. Yes, there are Tatars. So you could grant them autonomy and give the power to the Tatars, because historically there were many, not in many centuries, but after this time there were so few Tatars and so much more Russian and other settlers. So if you ask the people roughly in this time, when it was decided whether it will be part of Russia or a part of Ukraine, because before 1920s there's no Russia, no Ukraine, it's empire. Somebody would say not Ukraine, not Russia, a different Tatar Soviet Socialist Republic. Why not? We're not here to judge. I don't want to judge because it is an emotional thing now, what I feel like. But the history could unfold in whatever ways. So you have Soviet Union still, close to the Second World War and still a part of Ukraine. Never saw the Russians. You remember after when? After middle of the 14th century, like 500, 600 years they live apart, this western part. And now we're almost in our time, you see, 1933. People still live that they were living in 1933 anyway. So they say this happened until the First World War. First World War changes everything now. So this is roughly, I want to stop before the Second World War. So I stop here. Now it's like still the same picture roughly. You see, 1938, beginning of the First World War, and still you have this division. This part of Soviet Union, more close to Russia in the same state, and still this Western Ukraine, part of Poland. Western country, linguistically influenced, etc., by these Western Slavs. So then it's a mess. After this year, it's a mess. First World War, up and down. If you want to understand the new picture, you have to go after the end of the war, which is like 45, let's say 46. Wow. So now you have the situation that lasted until...
Wait, go back when Germany occupied everything?
If we talk about the Second World War, we will stay here. So, and I don't know the details so much.
Okay.
So we want to stop right at the end of the Second World War, like.
Germany occupied so many stuff.
But for a couple of years. So because it's a wartime. I mean, the army went there. It was a war situation. It was not like a settled country. You can't call Germany. I mean, if Germany stayed here for a year, you don't call it Germany. It's a war. It's occupied. It's occupation. Anyway, so this is the picture that stays until 1990s. For the first time, the Western Ukrainians are now a part of Soviet Union, are now the same state like the Russians. They live in the same state like the Russians. They are many centuries ago. Some of them already 400 years. Some of them depend. The more you go to the west, the more you find them affiliated to the Russians. The more you go to the south, the more affiliated to the Russians culturally because they are the settlers and this kind of stuff. So now it's clear, this south, east, northwest division. First time they see the Russians. First time they live together. No wonder why they feel totally different after so many centuries living under Western countries. No wonder why they look towards the West, especially the Western Ukrainians. So this is a picture until now. This is Soviet Union, Polish Soviet Union. This is Western Ukraine. And they will stay like this. What happened now here? What happened here?
The fall of USSR.
The fall of USSR, and you have the independent Ukraine, independent Russia, independent Belarus. And this is today's picture. Why they are white? I don't have to understand this white color. Anyway. So, and this is the year exactly when I started explaining you about the situation. So, in the year 1950 something, it was a decision of Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union, decided for practical reasons to shift this peninsula, Crimea, which was a part of Russia since 1783, but then underwent other developments, and before it was a part of the Tatars. So it's not so easy to just say it was Russia all the time. Anyway, what's important is that people understand each other now. They found a solution. They don't kill each other. There's no war.
In Crimea.
Anywhere, everywhere. I mean, Crimea is now under Russian.
You're talking about 2001.
2001, that everything started roughly. I mean, this the beginning of division of people that look towards the west and people look towards the east. But the thing is that, okay, people, I don't want to judge. If there is a referendum, what will be the outcome, even if it's a UN directed, as Elon proposed. What we have now is a war. The will of the people is unknown under these conditions. Anyway, what's important is that people understand the truth. Who knows what the outcome, but whatever the outcome will be of the war, people will have to live together anyway. So
yeah,
these people here should understand those people here anyway, and the other way around. Because you see, all these historical developments make them have this distinct identity, but still, they call themselves Ukrainians. I mean, even people in the very southeast that they feel they don't want to be part of the West, they want to be closely affiliated to Russia, they speak Russian, they look like Russians, they say we're Ukrainian. So they had their identity, these people, for some reason. These people in the south, because of this Cossack state in the south, because of the maybe 100, 200 years living apart from the Russians, those people clearly why they feel not Russians, because of all this Western influence and linguistic and everything. But for some reason, and those people feel Ukrainians. So they are kind of one identity. So Ukrainian identity is like have two sides, like two kinds. And I think both they have to respect each other somehow. Both have to understand each other. Whatever the outcome of the war, even in Cyprus, whatever the outcome will be after a solution, even if there is two states in Cyprus, North Turkish and South Greek, if we live all together, we have to understand each other, because in Cyprus we have similar problems. We don't know our history. the history of Cyprus for the Turkish Cypriot is a different story, for the Greek Cypriot is a different story. If we don't learn the truth, we can't reconcile. And everybody agrees that whatever is the outcome of the war, even if it's a total victory of the Ukrainians and take back even Crimea and everything, they will have to deal with the sentiment of the people in the south and east, whatever the outcome is. Neighbors and people that live in the same place, whatever they are, and everybody, they have to be friends in this world. I mean, we have to understand each other. But I mean, this historical narration I said now is, if it's the right one or if it's the wrong one, at least this question I put, they have to be answered by all Ukrainians. Why in the south and in the east they feel more closely related to the Russian somehow identity, and in the west, northwest, more close to the west. None of them are traitors of their identity, because both narratives are kind of truth. They spend a lot of time apart from the Russians in the west, they spend also parts of the country, parts that they were together with the Russians, some of them more, some of them less. If you go very back in time, you found them all being the same. If you go more back in time, you found all the Slavs being the same. If you go very back in time, all the Indo-Europeans, if you have a look in this map, were one. So history, you interpret it as you want. History is like as it's been described, is the present determine the past. It's like the children determine who the parents are. It's like the children give birth to their parents. Somebody said this, I don't remember. So if we will decide now who are our ancestors, we have to understand that this is not how things go. Like, history created us, and if we want to understand and reconcile whatever and live together, we have to understand that we are the children and history is there and we have to discover it, not to invent it. A kind of
interesting,
something like that. And I became kind of anyway.
It's beautiful. This was like a book that you say to kids, like
a fairy tale.
Yeah, like a fairy tale. You explained us all these things very simply, like a fairy tale. I was like sitting here very relaxed, and I think I understood Elon Musk tweet.
Oh yeah. The first two parts at least. Yeah. I didn't know I know it. I know all these details. You know, I learned them because I was very interested in a part of this map, like this part of the southern, this part of Ukraine I know very well, and this part of Moldova I know very well, because here lives the Gagauz, people that I studied very much as an amateur. I'm not a historian, I'm not a linguist, and I lived many years among them. So I know these things just because I know this place. So again, I repeat, people shouldn't trust exactly what I said. I think the big picture is roughly what I said, but I think I put the questions that have to be answered by somebody who wants to understand the history of Ukraine, even if my answers and my explanation were wrong.
You see, guys, how lucky I am that I have such a teacher to explain me everything I want.
You have to see how I explain him the other things of Elon said.
All right.
It was a time I was explaining him what the difference between physics and the information theory and so many other things anyway. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
I love you. Thank you so much.
Love you to all. Love the Ukrainian people.
Yeah. Much love to the Russian people, to the Ukrainian people, to everyone in the world.
Every people, anyway.
So we're going to do a lot of podcasts with my teacher in the future, twice a year.
I hope more close to physics and my expertise, because I'm shy to talk about things that historians had to talk anyway. But
goodbye,
okay,
people.
Bye. See you guys.